It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. I decided to do a little bit of a different focus today. Still going to be covering a lot of most of the topics that I wanted to cover today. But I was discussing this as I have been over the last probably month, more than that in general, but really in earnest for the past month. I've been really discussing this topic with people outside of the show, or in the sense of like, my normal life, going around talking to people and just trying to decide. And I've even discussed this on the show before, whether or not it's important to put more focus or just any focus, that's the scale, on propaganda, on attempts to deceive, on information that's false that I need to debunk, for example. And part of it is always important. It's something I've been really grappling with because it is an important thing, especially because, and this is my logic for now, even today, why I'm putting more than I have in the past focus on it. I see good people in my life that I know are falling for these things. My opinion has always been, and I shouldn't say always, but when I express that, and it has been for a while around these larger topics, that the majority does see this. I think there's a lot of ways that shines through. That's my opinion. My point, though, is that I often wonder how much of the people are we being played by an illusion, social media, AI engineered, kind of construct for what we think the majority is. It's a very important conversation to always be having. My point is, I wonder if I get drawn into that. And I wonder if I am covering propaganda that we're all aware is mostly a lie, and the only people really falling for it are those that are invested in the agenda or team sport politics, which I don't think is the majority. So all that's to say, today I decided, as I was grappling with this to start, that and again, because of people that I see are close to me, that I know aren't part of that agenda, aren't, paid to do something, aren't part of some propaganda political dynamic. They just believe these things. And we talk about them, and I just can't wrap my mind around how they're falling for these things, because I know they're smarter than that. And so I come back to the point today where I decided today what I'm essentially going to do, the larger point, and this won't be a constant, more often than not, it'll be diving through most of what we're going to be doing today, which is information around these topics, facts that you can check for yourself. But and it kind of on that same point, while we go through some of these things and to start a major focus, I wanted you guys to see some of these just bombastically false claims, things that are very easy to prove are wrong, that are being put out there in major ways. Some of these things that are being, kind of rapidly discussed on the social media platforms, wondering whether they're kind of trolling everybody out. The same kind of game where are they lying and trolling, or is it real? And it's important to highlight for very clear reasons we'll go over today. But it's also because I want people who are falling for it to see that these things aren't true and have the materials, the tools to be able to dissect that for themselves. And so I wanted to do this in the context of the things we were going to be covering today, such as the conversation of the Afrikaners, the conversation of Israel, the conversation of the constitutional overlap, immigration, and throughout all of this, how many major manipulations are taking place, which is always the case. But I don't know if you agree. I personally feel that the two-party illusion, partisan propaganda, is at a level I've never, at least in my doing this, never seen it before. As I said before, I'm used to a nuance, so that average people would look at it and go, I don't detect anything wrong with that. They just disagree with each other, right? Whereas today, it's not just a small nuance on a point within a larger conversation. It's just outright deception. And it is not unique to the left and the right. I'm seeing it everywhere. Now in the moment, and this is usually how we saw it, like with the COVID-19 timeframe, it's the group that is currently in power. And that's one faction of the government, in my opinion, not divided, not against each other, as people would frame it, but that now because they're the leading force and under the spotlight, that they're putting out more, let's say. I don't think it's unique to one side, and I think it oscillates as they go through these power structures. But we'll go through some of these points that I think are important to highlight that show you just flat dishonesty. Or more alarmingly, I think that they don't even know that they're wrong. Or I guess even thirdly, that they don't care because they just want to make money for these. They want to, whatever it is. But we will be going over some of these larger important topics to rattle off before we get started. I'm going to do another point on big pharma health related topics. Again, pointing to something Brooke Jackson highlighted to kind of, again, make the points as you'll see how this connects of the partisan kind of intertwining of all of these and why that seems to be the largest block for us. Just simply seeing the obvious that's right in front of us as both sides point to some different version of the obvious truth. And so people that might not be a part of that just get confused and just check out and follow somebody that seems to know what they're talking about. That's why, whether it's this show or anybody else, you should always be checking and questioning all the time. We're going to talk about a couple overlaps within that same conversation of the pharmaceutical point, tariffs that kind of interconnect. And then, of course, some really obvious ones as I'm just telling you about around claims of different things that are happening and one interesting point that we're going to highlight, that I'm going to highlight today that we're going to talk about tomorrow on a Independent Media Alliance panel, which I think we'll have more in that one panel than we've had yet. I mean, it's who knows what will happen by tomorrow if somebody decides they can't show or something, whatever schedules change. But as of now, it looks like we have James Corbett coming. It looks like we have Whitney Webb and Derek Rose and myself and Jason Burmis. Patrick Wood, I believe, is supposed to come. I mean, I think we have like 10 plus. Kit Knightley, Ian, I think he said he wasn't going to. But the point is that about 10 plus people, all people with good followings, important opinions, that we're going to be discussing artificial intelligence. And obviously, most importantly for the whole thing, nonpartisan, objective conversation. And we're going to be discussing artificial intelligence and how that influences decision-making processes today, research, how people are blindly trusting what they're seeing from artificial intelligence or using it entirely for research without checking elsewhere. So that's to be said. Two reasons I'm saying it today, so you know that it's happening tomorrow. Make sure you tune in. It'll be on TLAV, and it might be also streamed out on other people's platforms, which I'm trying to get going. Derek might be doing that. I want this to be not a TLAV alone thing. That's what I'm building as we get past when the website comes up. But the point is for today is that I have many different reference points that show what Grok has to say. Again, that's not because I blindly trust Grok, as I even post now in the tweets. It's because I'm trying to make a point. That these are people that in this construct, these are the ones that we will be talking about in large point tomorrow about trusting AI because it's Elon Musk's platform or so on. And then the moment is shown that Grok is not wrong, well, Grok's not always correct, which is accurate. But it's funny how in any other context it's used as a stopgap, mic drop point. And really, as you go through the information, you can look at the source material as we always do, because it's not only Grok that's showing this in the context of our conversation today. We're looking it up first and then using that as a counterpoint. The information is also true, and you can prove it. The information, the links are right there, and people don't want to see things for partisan reasons. Now, the African ears point, I think, is very interesting. We're going to go over again, if we have time, depending on a few things, depending how long we take in the beginning, as well as a conversation of the constitutional issue, which I think is very, very, if not the most important thing happening. It is unreal to me how much of this conversation is getting kicked off by partisan discussion, division. What's the other term we were discussing? Just, people that are being driven into partisan conversations so they miss the forest for the trees. And it's happening every day around one of the most important things we deal with. These are the very things that, if at all we have any of it left, are holding the powerful government from just completely running roughshod over everything. Now, maybe that's gone. Maybe that never existed. I still think it's important to highlight these, at least through our beliefs in this country, what they use to make us think we still live in what we should. Even the idea itself, if it doesn't even exist, is still that going away should matter to us. And so as we watch this happening, I can't help but keep seeing that, of course, it's the administration that you would expect the idea is that it's painted as a left-leaning thing and that the conservative is the one fighting for free speech kind of a thing. And that's why this is the group to roll it out, because their people are less aware of how obvious this is. Again, you tell me what you think in the chat. Is that most people? Is it the 0.01% within the partisan game? I don't know. But I'll start with this point that I think is important that I tweeted out today. It just says, stop listening to what they're saying. Start focusing on what they're doing. Even those who mean their words can often be stopped or delayed for a multitude of reasons. What is the outcome? And do you support it? Very simple. Politicians are not your friends. I don't care if they actually could be trusted. It does not behoove you to trust or pretend these people are like you or the same, even if they are, even if they could be your friend, because in that position, they are not. That is, almost an incestuous dynamic. If you are going to act like these people are on your side as opposed to somebody that you're supposed to hold to account, that's how you get taken advantage of. And maybe not this time, maybe next time, maybe a year from now, maybe decades from now, when that builds and people start pretending like these people are all, your savior that fights the other side, or rather at this point, just the deep state. Whoever the other is the deep state today. The meaningless nature of all the words they use. It is the outcome that matters. And team sport politics. And I really do think most people at least wrap their mind around this and agree. But then you get the adults in the room, as we heard during the last election, that force you into some broken logic of thinking nothing else can matter. Or we might as well do it now since this is all we have. Whatever the dumb thing is they say that allows you to think that doing the wrong thing now somehow makes sense. That's how I see it anyway. But regardless of how you think of my framing, the outcome, how can we not agree on that? Whether Trump means it or not, whether Biden means it or not, what happened? Yes, and whether they stopped him or not, or whether he did it or not, it matters what happened. Because then you can look at the precedent, you can look at how far, and then maybe you always think he's trying and always failing. Okay, well then still we can reflect on the problem and say, okay, why isn't it happening? Well, then that makes the system broken, doesn't it? Maybe we should stop leaning into the same broken system over and over. They need you to constantly believe that this will keep changing, even though it always stays the same. So Brooke Jackson and I, as I pointed out recently, had another interview. I think it's our 4th interview. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, where she very clearly highlights the fact that Donald Trump's new administration is the same thing in regard to this conversation, who has sided with Pfizer, who said the shot is safe and effective. She literally said in her tweet, Trump sides with Pfizer. And it's his DOJ at this point. Now, what you're going to see from this point, which is why I'm bringing this up, well, 2 reasons, actually. I forgot I included this. This and I think it's Sense Receptor put out a great clip of our show, of our interview, and the responses you get are very telling. Let me try to remember to bring this up for you guys so you can see me. So Brooke Jackson said this, and just another point I want to highlight that she pointed out, and this overlaps with the AI conversation, which we will be getting into tomorrow, but I'm also going to be touching on probably the day after that in our next show around Palantir, which is very important. But she says, commit fraud in clinical trial, you'll go to jail, unless you're Pfizer. Data falsification, this is a really important point that she just really nails home that people seem to not really include. Trial results were fabricated, undermining the entire drug approval process. Okay, so if you're taking, before we even get to AI, if you're taking data from something Pfizer produced, and then from that point forward, acting like you're scrutinizing everything, but you're taking the data they provided at face value, you've already failed. This is a group that's been caught. I don't even need to bring it up again, but I will. The Pfizer tracker, it's absolutely mind-blowing how many things, and this doesn't seem to even change anymore. There's been so many since this point, but even on record, 107 totaling over $11 billion in fines for crimes. This is just for Pfizer. And just one of the main ones, False Claims Act. They paid out over $1 billion, 22 different crimes. False Claims Act. They're lying about stuff, or off-label approving, price fixing, foreign corruption. Yeah, no big deal though. Same old, same old. And I'm not saying it's unique to Pfizer, but the point is this seems to be a central partner in all of this. And Trump just sided with Pfizer, just like the rest of them did. The point is, whether Pfizer or Moderna or whatever else, that's one of the ways we were played. And she also points out that AI was included all the way back then, rather all the way back in 2020 and before. So her point now is simply recognizing that they're continuing in this same broken model. And even worse, spearheading and wildly increasing the mRNA direction. That's the U.S. government, but currently the Trump administration. It says FDA was misled. The agency was fed false data that could have shaped regulatory decisions. I'm of the mind that the FDA is a captured agency, especially in this conversation, but health risks, these trials involved asthma drugs used by millions, motive, money, like always. She says, but unlike the small fish who get charged, Pfizer walks away untouched again. And she includes a link to this that wouldn't open for me earlier, but I'm sure she said she checked it. It was opening. Now, she also points out that Yaakov Roth, He's one of the attorneys working to dismiss her case against Pfizer. Really, her case, which is currently against the U.S. government, but Pfizer is the main point around it. And again, our interview on below, we'll have the link to the other 3 we've done, going back to the beginning of this conversation. That we were the first person. I was the first person to interview on video and break down the story following British Medical Journal. And it is a profoundly important story that gets lip service from a lot of partisans, but rarely gets any real momentum. And I think you know why, because all the screaming partisans at the top of the paradigm aren't really clearly either side is okay with this conversation, or at the very least, they don't recognize that and don't care as it continues down the same path. But her point is showing you who the person is leading the charge against her case, the current DOJ, which, just in case you weren't sure, is currently the principal deputy assistant attorney general for the civil division of the Justice Department as of February 2025. Not that should be surprising to you, but everyone loves to make this flimsy argument about some DOJ holdover or whatever else it is, right? So if the argument is suddenly, as even Barnes was saying, it's DOJ holdovers from the Trump administration, or from the Biden administration, well, that seems to not be true, seeing as how he's the one leading the case, February 2025. Either way, if we're still falling for this old partisan left hangover dynamic or right, it is the same government. And it's just so transparent if you pay attention. Look at what she's telling you. But on that note, the real point I brought it up for today, here's some clips that Sense Receptor is putting out. But this is what we get. Here, let's not forget before I even go into these. Half the internet are bots today, probably a lot more than that. This platform, I can guarantee you it's worse than that. So always consider that it's just a bunch of bots controlling the way we see the conversation. I myself need to be reminded of that because I get frustrated by these things and you go, wait, that's right. Half of these things could be lies today. But DOJ has 80% same Biden people. That's just flatly not true. I mean, let's put it this way. If you want to pretend 80% of the Department of Justice are people from the Biden administration, which from my glance at this, and I didn't do deep, ongoing name-by-name research, does not appear to be accurate. But if you're going to argue that is accurate, Trump still made the decision to keep all these people. You can't just keep giving everybody a pass around what you want and pretend that, even if there's somehow somebody he didn't know was there, moving forward, it is still Trump's responsibility. No matter how you want to frame this, that's what real leaders do. The problem is today that no matter how far you go forward, it's always some old lefty. It's somebody who had a grudge against Trump, and they never seem to want to prove that. But so that's the biggest problem, is even her lawyer seems to be going, whoa, it's the lefties. How about we just recognize that the current government, that is his administration, in every other facet of their conversation are also promoting what Pfizer is. mRNA shots, MMR shots, vaccines in general. It's pretty obvious to see. Here's another one. There are a lot of leftovers from the Biden DOJ. So this kind of statement is meant to say, well, this is a problem. We agree, but it's probably because of those lefties. And then what do? Do they go on to share the topic? Do they reach out to their people? Do they talk to the DOJ? No, they put it away and go, yeah, the lefties did it. And they stop talking about it. Oh, well, but I thought you cared. I do. Oh, okay. Well, I thought you thought this was important. We do. But the lefties. Okay, so we just give up because the left, I don't understand the block there. And you see this too. Regardless, even if you're right and it's lefties holdover in the DOJ, let's solve the problem. Let's demand that Donald Trump fire or put that person in jail, right? No, but it never happens because, frankly, it doesn't exist. Not to say that there's not people that are overlapping, but if they ever had the ability to put, right now, what his whole base is calling for people to be arrested. And every day they tell you there's somebody from the DOJ or from holdover from the Bidens or whatever else that are committing crimes, Social Security, and nobody gets marched out in handcuffs. Nobody goes to jail. Not the Clintons, not Bidens, not Fauci. I don't know how much we can continue to ignore. Same point. This person says, you do realize that just because Biden is gone doesn't mean people aligned with him then are all gone. Wow, what a bombshell revelation. But this is the statement to get you to go, well, it's not Trump's fault. Okay. Frankly, that's irrelevant to me, seeing as how I see the government as one thing. How about we solve the problem? But no, he's already gone. He's already down the road. He's not thinking about this anymore because the DOJ is Biden's. Now, I'm being facetious. I don't know this person or whether he's doing anything now. I'm just trying to make a point for how often this is happening right now. So another example in this conversation is the way that we keep seeing these kind of statements, which I hope we see this kind of thing. Saudi Agra says, crazy, this wasn't happening all along. Now, I should, for the podcast, Trump administration to require placebo-controlled studies for new vaccines. And it says vaccine experts are worried that these rules will make it harder for the public to access some shots. See, this is the absurdity of the NPR conversation. or rather the mainstream left and right, which I don't think represents the majority of people. But every time there's a counterbalance, or rather an argument, whatever it is, the argument is, well, see, the lefties want you to, they only care about it because it'll restrict more shots. But is that the lefties, or is that the left team sport politics minority? Maybe you disagree, but think about that, because if all you're pointing at is the other side of the congressional side, you know, the idiots in Congress on the left versus the idiots in the Congress on the right, those don't represent everybody, but that's the narrative and the opinions and the cartoonish things that the left points out about the right, the right points out about the left. Meanwhile, the rest of us are like, what's going on? These people are out of their minds. I hope, anyway. I do think that's the reality. But so in the case here, to require. Okay, great. So when it happens, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that in action. I've already seen people like Malone say this, we're doing this and it's all happening. Where? I can look at studies right now that are freshly starting that aren't at least claiming, but who knows? Maybe it'll happen. Let's put it this way. I have not seen an official statement or action or policy that says from here forward, from anyone under the HHS, this has to be the case. No, maybe it hasn't. I missed it. But I'm looking for these things, and all I see is the statements that Trump too require this, meaning it will happen at some point at an undetermined time in the future, or maybe not, as often happens, and maybe he means it, and it still doesn't happen, as often happens. But it's frustrating that we can't talk about this in honesty and say, well, that'd be great when it starts to happen. Now, second point is we already have this conversation. We had this during COVID-19, and I pointed out that they do use placebos, but they're meningitis vaccines or X, Y, and Z. So if he just says required a placebo, well, they argue a placebo in these cases. And look, it's not the same. Look, I would argue a placebo does not, a vaccine doesn't meet the definition of a placebo. They would disagree. Sort of like the ongoing nuance they argue between gain of function and different. We all know they're manipulating, but that doesn't stop them from doing it. So when you put this out there and they argue they do use these as placebos, and that's what they've done forever, like Fauci said, does it actually stop anything? My point is we won't know until they actually happen. So all I'm asking is people to hold off until we see the actual change begin before we start pretending we already have won. But see, that's the whole thing, is there's so many people that are in this only to, beat the other side, even if we all lose. But he's right, though. It's crazy that this wasn't, that they've been using meningitis vaccines or nothing at all, as RFK rightly points out, which that's insane to me, but that's the broken system. Now, if we know that, why are they still doing these things in regard to the same shots, in regard to the same platforms? It's all, or MMR or anything else. It's hard for me to take him at face value or seriously when he's already gone 180 on some of the most important things that he's been advocating for or against. I find that to be pretty damn alarming. But that point's important for that same reason. And here's Robert Malone saying, placebo-controlled trials for new vaccines are being required, including for all new COVID boosters. Now, again, I didn't see this. I don't see where, and look, I'll be the first to say Robert Malone probably has access to a hell of a lot that I don't. So he might know something I don't. But when we see something tangible in front of us, or we see studies that continue to come out with only saline placebo shots for the counterbalance and nothing else, then I will say, hell yeah, it's happening. I want us to be very cautious about how we fall into these things. Robert Malone himself has already been pretty gung-ho about things that I've already shown you aren't actually happening. I've numerous examples around the partisan conversation. He says Secretary Kennedy has announced a significant policy shift. See my point? So yeah, I heard him announce that too. Has that now actually come into play? Are there already legal restrictions? I mean, is there policy in place? I don't see it. Now, not to be a dead horse, I just think that's really important. He says, including updated COVID boosters. Oh, okay. So we're still giving COVID boosters? What do you mean updated COVID boosters? You mean they're going to go through and do brand new entire 2-year trials on the updated COVID boosters they're currently giving children? I'd love for you to explain that to me. I'm not even trying to scream dishonesty. I don't know, but that seems a hard thing to swallow, right? Including updated COVID boosters. Or are they just going to say, well, we did that the first time and we showed you that it was safe, and so we're going to use the new platform? I mean, you know how this goes. He has come out and been pretty pro mRNA for the future direction. So I'm worried about that. So have a few people. And then John says, relying upon corrupt trials, and this goes back to Brooke Jackson's point, right? Relying upon corrupt trials and trial operators yet again is a fool's errand. Okay, so the question is that an accident? Does he not think about that? Or is that something that they're aware of? Or do they have more information that shows that something will change? I don't know. He says, we have a placebo group of nearly 100 million Americans and trial groups of around 200 Americans. Basically, his point is, we can tell you they're hurting people right now. We don't need a saline counterbalance to prove that these things are killing children. He says the data is on government servers. He knows that too. Just demand data transparency. Simple, cheap. He's right. So the other, that was it right there. Wait, did I mix one up? Oh, I think I did. Hold on. Oh, I think I just lost it. Not super important. It was another comment. Oh, it's this one. I'm glad I saw that. Dr. Lynn Durla. Did she change her name? I remember her from before, but anyway, she points out they continue to use relative risk for vaccines. You know what's crazy? I bet you I can pull that up right now because hold on. Let me just remove this last one. I've got too many in here. Let's see if it pops up. You guys may not know what I'm talking about if you're just tuning in, but you'll remember this if you, yep, there it is. Look at that. This is crazy. So, you guys know they've been following us for a while. During the COVID-19 timeframe, we were knocking these things down as early as they came around, like long before the average mainstream alternative media conversation. And this, what she's saying, let me read this first and I'll play this clip for you, is very important. If you don't remember, absolute risk reduction versus relative risk reduction, okay? You know what? I'll play it first so it'll make more sense when I'll read what her statement is. First, just remember, they're currently still using relative risk for vaccines. So even if they use the placebo, a real saline, which they always should have been, there's 100 other ways they can manipulate these things on top of just lying to you about the results, as Brooke was very clear about. But watch this video. This is the difference between AAA, absolute, or ARR, absolute risk reduction, and RR, relative risk reduction, and how they use them to manipulate you about how safe things appear.
You have the right to know the potential benefit of any intervention. For example, Pfizer reported that its vaccine shows a 95% efficacy. That sounds like it protects you 95% of the time, right? But that's not actually what that number means. That 95% refers to the relative risk reduction, but it doesn't tell you how much your overall risk is reduced by vaccination. For that, we need absolute risk reduction. In the Pfizer trial, 8 out of 18,198 people who were given the vaccine developed COVID-19. In the unvaccinated placebo group, 162 people got it, which means that even without the vaccine, the risk of contracting COVID-19 was extremely low at 0.88%, which the vaccine then reduced to 0.04%. So the net benefit, or the absolute risk reduction that you're being offered with a Pfizer vaccine, is 0.84%. That 95% number, that refers to the relative difference between 0.88 and 0.04%.
I mean, think about what a wild deception that is. Like insanely deceptive to tell people it's 95% effective, when all it does is change the static reality down to 95% relative difference, right? I mean, look at the numbers again. We're talking about 0.88 to 0.04. That's the safe. And I mean, even if all you got was a bad stomach ache, I would argue that wasn't worth it. Like that insane small difference, especially since we know by every metric we have and all the peer-reviewed science now that this was from the beginning less than the flu, according to every metric in the Ioannidis group. Here we are people still pretending like this isn't true. So we are literally in the post-truth world. If we can't even to this day agree on the basic provable facts, even the trust the science crowd is currently ignoring the science, which we were doing that during the whole process. But just remember how important that is. And now when they're telling you, look, we're going to be requiring placebos for all these things. Well, what about all the other problems? They're still putting these things out. Trump is still telling you they're safe and effective right now. His DOJ, as Brooke showed us, has also agreed with that.
0.04%. That's what they call 95% relative risk reduction. And relative risk reduction is well known to be a misleading number, which is why the FDA recommends using absolute risk reduction instead. Which begs the question, how many people would have chosen to take the COVID-19 vaccines had they understood that they offered less than 1% benefit?
Seems pretty clear to me. So what she says, they continue to use relative risk for vaccines. There is no way to show benefit in something with an infection fatality rate of 0.15%, as there is only risk since it's a gene product. Why do we accept mass vaccinating with potentially harmful injections bypassing the gut, liver, etc., for illnesses that have such an incredibly low infection fatality rate? Injections should be more scrutinized than oral therapies, and gene products even more than real vaccines. Right? See, it's people like her who have remained consistent through this. Right? We've seen a lot of people who were singing a similar tune who are now suddenly saying things a little bit different. And again, what John points out, Boudin here, is ultimately that this is an important thing from the starting point of the data, right? That they could lie from the beginning, and if they then scrutinize it going forward, which is what they claim they're doing, you're still accepting a fraudulent entity's information, which is what Brooke has been saying the entire time. Now, that's where it overlaps with the AI point. Because let's not forget, as I'm going to talk about tomorrow, or I'll probably mention it tomorrow, but more so in the next show that I do, 7C's put this out. So there's two things to point out. How Palantir is growing into this alarming entity. I mean, I think the main point, if I can grab this really quickly, was that WikiLeaks put out a tweet, was basically an open letter released by 13 former Palantir employees, just ripping it, going through how clearly this is something that is basically challenging every ethic that they ever set out to begin with. Every concern we have is shared by these former employees. Now, of course, because they overlap and make points about diversity and inclusion, that I argue too many conservatives and Republicans will dismiss it because left-right politics. Despite the fact of whatever their political view is, what Palantir or whatever entity is doing what they're doing is it is literally antithetical to it's counter to what we believe this country should be. And we all know that, if we're being honest with ourselves, because if you put this in the hands of Biden or Obama, they would be screaming their minds off, their lungs off, I guess, if you say that right. But so the point is that WikiLeaks put this out. And on top of that, that was the one point we'll get into in the next show. But then 7Cs also points out, which you might have seen, David Icke and others shared the same thing, which is that in the budget reconciliation bill, which I'll go into more in depth in the next show, as he shows you right here on page 2, puts in an important point that to modernize, basically it says, we're trying to cut to the chase here. Oh, where was that? I swear it was right there. Hold on. Let's try to do this quickly. And then yeah, that's the same spot. It says, there is hereby appropriated to the Defense Commerce. Oh, that's what it was. I remember now. It's further down. See, I'll just, damn it. This is what I do. And then I should have just done it in earnest in the first place. Here is the actual bill. Now, since I bring it in, I'll include it, but I will be going into this in the next show, like in depth. But since I didn't have the spot lined up, it's right here. So the bottom line, I should have just said this, but I always want to show it to you so you guys can see the actual source material, like so few do today, outside of the Independent Media Alliance, that is, that they're basically creating a 10-year gap where there's no restriction or regulation on AI. And Palantir and XAI and OpenAI, they like all primarily running through one channel, it seems, are the point. Now, it says, this is hereby appropriated to the Department of Commerce for a fiscal year 2025 out of any funds in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, $500 million to remain available until September 30th, 2035 to modernize and secure federal information technology systems. Like we've all been telling you was the only point of this. DOGE and all the rest, efficiency move, it's AI government. It's AI efficiency through the guise of that, AI control. Through the deployment of commercial artificial intelligence. The deployment of automated technologies and the replacement of antiquated business systems. They're talking about the Great Reset, guys. That's what this is. They're reimagining the world through the AI conversation. Now, it says the Secretary of Commerce shall use the funds appropriated under the subsection to replace, modernize within the Department of Commerce, legacy business systems, and so on, everything. They're talking about the Great Reset. To facilitate within the Department of Commerce the adoption of artificial intelligence models that increase operational efficiency and service delivery to improve with Department of Commerce the cybersecurity posture of the federal technology systems through modernized architecture, automated threat detection, and integrated artificial intelligence solutions. I mean, that means whatever they want it to mean. And your automated threat detection, it's going to be aimed at you. Now, I thought it actually, that is right there. Okay. So I was going to say list the 2035 date, but here's what it says. Except as provided in paragraph 2, no state or political subdivision thereof may enforce any law or regulation regulating artificial intelligence models, artificial intelligence systems, or automated decision systems during the 10-year period. I can't even that is see what I'm noticing, and a lot of people picking up on is it seems the game today is just to come right out and just on the surface. Like, don't, as somebody's pointing out in regard to the foreign policy point, no longer use shell companies and try to hide it because that makes you look guilty. Just openly take the bribes. And it's not unique to Trump. If you think that, you're not paying attention. Every one of these people are enriching themselves in every way they can. So my point is, instead of trying to secretly do this in some awkward, they're just coming right out and saying, for 10 years, you can't regulate or control, basically you may not enforce any law or regulation which regulates artificial intelligence models, systems, or automated decision systems at all for 10 years. I mean, think about even Elon Musk himself was one of the people screaming that this could go rapidly out of control unless we do it right. So really the point was, as long as he gets to do it, and he's in control. That is insane to me, especially with the amount of control we were just highlighting from the satellite discussion, the control of information flow. I mean, I just don't know why people are not more alarmed. Even if you believe in Elon Musk, it doesn't matter who we're talking about. One person, one entity should not have this much control, this much invasive surveillance. And I mean, 100 other things we could point out. But so the point was that Brooke is pointing out here, with those things in mind, she calls for an immediate suspension. Now, again, going back to the overlap of Big Pharma, right? These shots that using AI to develop these things. Don't forget, they just told you with Stargate, the new platforms, that's what this is. Their whole point was using AI to develop drugs. And she says she calls for an immediate suspension of any regulatory authorizations or approvals that relied on AI processed data until independent review is completed. Now, she's talking about the data side of not necessarily the actual. Well, I argue that applies. What I was going to say was this would be the AI automated kind of background data that leads to the creation of the shot. But the way she reads that or says that, it applies, I think, to any of it. The platform, the data they use the AI they use to produce the ones and zeros required to input what they need to pump out the antigen they'll put in your body, or however the way you frame that, or rather use your body as the platform to produce it internally, which is a DARPA program. But it says FDA published guidance on use of artificial intelligence to support regulatory decision-making for drug and biological products in January 2025. So Biden hands it off to Trump, just like every time before it. Or, one to the next is the point. Pfizer used AI during the most critical phase of their vaccine study. The final data lock and efficiency analysis was 2020. So nothing new. So if you want a precedent, point out the 2020, the AI involved to create one of the most deadly things they've ever given the population, and now we're going to keep doing it with less oversight, less regulation, a Wild West free-for-all for the people that are currently using AI to genocide a whole people. Good times. So Brooke is calling it out. And she says here, Pfizer slashed its COVID clinical trial review down to 22 hours using AI. FDA turned the other cheek and said, hold my algorithm, cranked out a product review in 6 minutes. Do you remember when we told you this was going to be the conversation? Whether Biden or Trump before, they said we're going to get to a point where we could just pump in the new data. Plug and play was Moderna's whole thing, right? Here we are. She says, fast science kills. This is May 9th. I want to play this, actually. Forgot about this one. I didn't mean to take this much time on this point, but it's important, as I'm sure you can tell, because this also leads into the important conversation of, the overlap of the partisan manipulation with, this is monumentally important. And yet people are debating about partisans or, partisan deceptions. Here is the clip that is Marty, McKay? It was Marty McCary, who's been around. It's funny how these people seem to fluctuate in and out of all the same administrations. Oh, shoot. I just deleted something. Crap. Okay. I'll have to re-download something in a minute. I didn't realize I had that many videos. Here it is.
Well, that's right, Jonathan. Look, the president has told us to do everything possible to accelerate more cures for Americans without cutting any corners on the scientific evaluation of those products. And so
even though that's quite literally what it is. Simple. Right? I mean, that's the whole point. We've already seen this. So you can say that all you want, but here's the thing again. This is the central point for a lot of today. They'll say that, and that becomes the fact. Despite the actual facts, despite the actual precedent or the outcome, what we've seen over and over, the fact becomes what he just said to the partisan show. That's what guides the day right now, at least with the people that seem most conversed, most forced in front of you. And maybe that is an illusion, but I know good people fall for it. And that's what's concerning to me. The facts should matter, not what he just told you the facts are, which is obviously an important difference.
This week, I'm proud to announce that we used the latest generation of AI to assist with our first scientific product review.
That's Stargate for you.
And the reviewer
That's a big part of it.
told me that what normally took days to do was done by the AI in 6 minutes. And that reviewer was very excited. So I've set an aggressive target.
I mean, guys, think about this. As the Trump administration, you step into a field where the entire Biden administration has been being criticized. Well, and also, let's be clear, the Trump overlap to that was very relevant because these shots and the work on it and everything building up to 2020 was still happening. And then the handoff to Biden. Okay. Now, the point is that very clearly, or rather to frame it, think about being in Trump's position. And you know that everybody was saying these shots were rushed. They hurt people. Of course, ignoring Trump in that room, talking over Fauci about how we want it faster than what Fauci said, even though the point is, I think they're all part of the same game. The point is now think about being in this position. And instead of asking for more research, asking for better research, you make it faster. Now, sure, if you want to just pretend that AI means better, even though we have 1,000 reasons to prove that's not true, at least not right now. I mean, I just don't get where the block is. Isn't this the opposite of what you were saying before, that we wanted these things to stop, or the child schedule pulled down, or the vaccines banned entirely, or whatever else the core of his base was saying? Now he's saying you get more of them, more mRNA, and we'll do it even faster using artificial intelligence. And that's somehow not a flooring statement. It's like, you might as well just come out and say, we're doing the Great Reset Trump style. We go, yay. I mean, it's kind of what's happening.
To get this AI tool used agency-wide by the midsummer, by July 1st. And I think we're going to hit.
I mean, midsummer. So not only are you rapidly doing these, you're going to rapidly roll out the system before it's even, we're not even going to give it a month, a year to see if there's any bad side effects or see if it's not working properly. There's no trial period. We're just jamming this in, running forward. That's just insane to me. Guys, clearly something's wrong. I mean, this is not even logical in any, if you were going to do this, you would roll it out and you would test it. You would see if there's, I mean, that's not what they appear to be doing. Now, look, there has been use of this, but not in the sense of changing overall. I mean, even the point of DOGE in the U.S. government, not in the sense of changing everything. They're literally just rolling out all these things and jamming in their new AI program. And we've seen a hell of a lot of problems. Clearly not more efficient in 1,000 different ways, but they say it is. And again, the narrative leads the day.
That target, and we're going to see more deliveries. You know, I see incredible things in the pipeline, Jonathan. Treatments for ALS, stage 4 cancers.
And as usual, you know, we'll make you use your arms again. You know, and even if that happens, that's not the real point. You know, and maybe that guy gets to use his hands again, or maybe people do cure their cancer, but then they also get heart attacks and blood clots and live to their, and, you know, die in 3 years. You know, that seems to be not a good change off. Now, I'm not saying we know for sure that's what's going to happen, but the precedent is there with what we've already seen. And I, for one, and I can guarantee you the majority of Trump's base does not feel right about anything mRNA, especially when it overlaps with artificial intelligence.
Neurodegenerative conditions, diabetes treatments, and these need to come to market once we can establish that they're safe and effective.
Oh, and how do you do that? Artificial intelligence, right? This process is infuriating. It's like the same thing of saying, we'll follow the law within X, Y, and Z. Well, when the law becomes whatever you decided is that day, the statement means nothing. So it's by waiting to see if it's safe and effective. Well, you say the shot is currently safe and effective, and we know it's not. It becomes meaningless. It is whether you decide to be on Trump's side or not. And I guess that's working to some degree, or maybe not. And that's the illusion they're presenting for you. So here, so again, her point is that they reduced this, as this is very clear and important to hear. And then again, the overlap to this point, which I do think is important, we'll get into more in the next show. Just that they're basically, I mean, now think about this overlap right there. You're using AI to roll out faster drugs than ever, when it's never been done before. And at the same exact time, reducing any kind of regulation or any kind of oversight to the AI process for 10 years. And of course, as David Icke pointed out, of course, right in the exact 10 years when they plan to roll out their AI dystopia. No coincidence there, though. Wild. Now, Children's Health Defense comes out and says, and they tag Donald Trump and Kennedy and say the COVID shots must be pulled from the market immediately. But they're not going to, though, even though that was a promise. I mean, in my opinion, they haven't, which suggests very clearly that they're not going to do that. And so right now, this is the main point. So as people are trying to tell you that they're bucking Big Pharma, they're poking Big Pharma in the eye because of statements that were made, what's the action? What's the actual outcome? Are they rolling out a Stargate mRNA platform program? Yes. Are they 180 supporting MMR shots? Yes. Are they rolling out multiple mRNA shots and rapid, fast tracking, self-amplifying bird flu shots? Yes. And more and more and more and more. So think about trying to frame that as being anti-Big Pharma when you are their biggest benefit right now, despite the narrative, right? It's like coming out, we hopefully get to today, and saying that Trump is against Netanyahu, but then if you look at the actions and everything's still going in the same direction, and he stands up and says Hamas is the one stopping everything, and you still pretend like he's somehow in a rift with Netanyahu. Or if he is, clearly recognize that he's still blindly supporting Israel and Netanyahu's on the way out. Either way, outcome, action precedent versus what they're saying needs to be important. Another day, another study confirming, they say, what we knew to be true about the mRNA shots. And I'm telling you, if you're not following this, guys, every day. Now, the reason I don't show them literally every time is because we know all this already. And I don't mean one study. I mean, for example, contamination should be a no-brainer at this point. What kinds of contaminants? Now that gets more interesting, or the idea that they're causing myocarditis. Are we even disputing that anymore? So there's been an endless amount of studies that come out that have just been ignored by all the people. Weirdly enough, even by a lot of the Republicans now, because they want to support Trump's agenda. See how this all works? Even though they should be shoving this in the face of the left they hate so much, they're all the same in my opinion. But it says they are in fact deadly and dangerous. We know that. And they're still promoting them. It says, with pillars of evidence showing how injurious the shots are, how is it possible they've remained in the market? Because Trump and RFK are allowing that. Pretty simple. Now, Dr. Henry Eli says, healers don't care what people say. I care, rather it goes healers. I care what people say. I care what they do. I'm sorry, I read it wrong again. Dr. Henry Eli says, healers, I don't care what people say. I care what they do. See, this is the point that I'm trying to make. He says, this is why I'm shocked that no one is talking about Secretary Kennedy's supporting this one we already talked about. The Arcturus 2304 star mRNA self-amplifying next generation vaccine. It'll probably pop up right here. And we've talked about self-amplifying, self-spreading. Yeah, here it is. A lot of these more than once. This is a self-amplifying mRNA influenza bird flu dynamic. I mean, this is exactly what we were supposed to be fighting. And worse, the continuation of the problem to a crazy degree. The kind of things we talked about, self-amplifying mRNA shots. People said you were lunatics during the last administration. And here we are. And this is his point. Why are we not calling this out? What are these and why are they bioweapons? And he goes through and highlights it for you. Follows work. The important thing is that people are consistent with their logic and don't just take partisanship as the only guiding force. That is a problem. Now, is it possible Kennedy's got a long-term plan? Yeah, sure. Obviously possible, but I'm not going to guess about that. Is there any indication? No, other than hope. And I can hope, but I'm not going to report hope. The report is he's doing it and we can see it. And that's not what we were promised, right? Now, the people are so invested in not being proven wrong that they don't want to even point it out. Well, that's going to damn well ensure the problem continues. Now, on to another example of an overlapping conversation of these. Now, this is just an important one that I think is important to highlight that goes into the main point from this is that these things aren't stopping. So if you're going to pretend that RFK and Trump and whoever else are actually trying to buck the big pharma system, why are the shots still there? Why are they promoting mRNA, right? And why have they not dealt with the blood supply? Because I get the point if they can't just snap their fingers and change everything, sure. But if you knew these were dangerous, like we do, you would come out and say, don't use them. Feel free, you can see. I even nuance the point about the idea of like you can do them if you want. It's like saying you can take, what I used last time, arsenic if you want. Now, if you can find arsenic randomly in the world and do it, that's your body. You can do what you want. But if the government's selling it to you with your tax dollars, that's not the same point of just having freedom to buy. That's them knowing what they're doing. They've proven it's dangerous. They should pull it off the market. Yeah, if you want to set them in a basket out in the front and say you're all welcome to take what you want, that would be freedom, not what they're doing. My point, though, is in this conversation, the blood supply is wildly contaminated. This has been going on long before COVID-19, and it's still being used. No one's brought it up. If you were going to do something about this monumentally important problem, as even RFK has called out, you would immediately say something at the very least. To argue it's, oh, he's playing the game. Okay, that's maybe not I'm not going to say I know that's not true, but that at least is disgusting to me that you're playing the game, maybe even for a positive outcome way down the line, maybe, and in the meantime, hurting children. But Dr. Ben Marble, who's called this out in the past, he simply says the entire blood supply in America and basically the whole world is contaminated with the spike protein poison bioweapon. He says we need to quit accepting blood from people who took the poison because we're seeing I think it's well too late for that get blood transfusions and are unvaccinated, and suddenly they get blood clots. And we talked about this in the midst of all this. And I will highlight again what we've talked about here. And this is just the tweet that I've shown. This is insane to me. This is still up. September 13th, 2022, American Red Cross says we don't label blood products as containing vaccinated or unvaccinated blood, as the COVID-19 vaccine does not enter your bloodstream. They literally still have that up. One of the most bombastic lies that everybody should be aware of by now. And just in case you don't know, here's one of 4 different peer-reviewed studies that I post below that says yet another peer-reviewed study finds that you're wrong. The title is literally SARS-CoV-2 spike mRNA vaccine sequences circulate in the blood up to 28 days after. This is a peer-reviewed study, NIH National Library of Medicine, 2023. And you can scroll down. There's 2 or 3 other studies that I posted, and they just don't care. And so here's another one. Yeah, here we now have another one. Red Cross, do you have the courage to finally admit you're wrong? No, they don't. Here's another one right there. So it's important to highlight that we know this. And of course, to demonstrate our value, we were showing you this a long time ago, as a lot of other people were. And now, I'll include this one for you. And now, in this case, Ben Marble is just calling it out, saying, how is this still happening? Right, so my point again is about how that's being allowed to continue. It's not like this is some hyperbole. We have multiple peer-reviewed studies that can prove that. If there was any concern, it would have been called out, but it's not. And I'll include these shows where we talk about this. Vaxxed Red Cross. There we go. Vaxxed Red Cross blood donations. This one was from 2024. Red Cross still claims that it doesn't enter your bloodstream. They reiterate this in a different post, by the way. And then just a link where you can follow shows that include the link to Red Cross, which also go outside the context of the vaccines or injections. Now, another point about the failures of the current administration in regard to health, and really, as I see it, just the ongoing failure of your government, left and right, or all of it. We've already called this out. And Carrie Wedler points out, remember when the new regime was going to end big government and ban seed oils? Or at least that was the floated idea from people that knew that Maha wanted that. She says, today I learned that in March, the USDA expedited agricultural welfare funds and is offering assistance for seed oil crops. I mean, people were just pointing out that I've heard this for a long time, that there's rat poisons that use, or like infertility drugs for rats that use cottonseed oil. Like, you don't need to convince me that these things are poison. These things are not, they shouldn't even be going in human bodies. They know that. It's been around for a long time. That's why they floated the idea that they would do something about it. Maybe they will tomorrow. As of right now, as I think even, who was it that pointed that out? They brought on a person in Trump's administration that was like promoting seed oils. Now they're giving assistance for these crops. I mean, and it's not even getting into ending big government. My God, it's exactly the opposite. And she goes, note, I don't think banning anything is the solution or even moral. However, it seems this is what a lot of Maha wanted, and they're getting the opposite. Now, again, I make the argument about something that if you want to go harvest seed oils for yourself, nobody should stop you, especially not the government. But if they're the ones producing these, taxing you for it, then yes, I would argue that it's their obligation, knowing they're bad, to not sell them to you with your own money. But the overarching thing we keep getting, Robert Malone shares this. It's a meme going around with RFK Jr. as a player on the Bears football team. And then the coach is talking to him saying, look, Bobby, we're 10 minutes in and you haven't won the game yet. The fans are pretty disappointed about that. It's just such a disingenuous post. Like, look, I know there are people that are also disingenuous from the other side of the paradigm, right? Coming at it from, attacking him for unjust reasons. Fine. That exists every time. That's how politics works, and we should always call it out. But what I just went through has nothing to do with expecting the world to change in 30 seconds. He's still promoting MMR shots. He's still, or rather is now promoting the very shot that he built. He's been fighting forever. He's still now promoting mRNA shots, right? I mean, from 16 different ways you can show the actions that have taken. Now, whether you want to pretend he's playing the game or he's been forced or his hands are tied, is blackmailed, I'd love for you to prove any of those things. I wouldn't dispute that those are possible. All we're saying is that this is not a fair statement to make, because in 1,000 ways we can see, rather many ways, it's not that he's hasn't solved it yet. He's going the other direction. And that's why you're gaslighting people, man. And I don't understand that. I mean, I do. It's just frustrating. Now, in that same vein of conversation, outside of the health conversation, let's talk about an interesting overlap. Well, I guess, no, this does actually overlap with Big Pharma. Justin Amash says, too long didn't read in regard to Trump's post about prescription drugs. You know where I'm going with this, I'd imagine. Trump supports economically foolish price controls. That's how he frames it. Now getting into whether, I'll make a quick point about it. But he says supports economically foolish price controls for prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals, and will sign an executive order to sidestep Congress and the Constitution again, which in every context we should not be okay with, regardless of whether the other side did it first. We're not in kindergarten, guys. If we agree that the executive orders, as Trump also pointed out, are a problem, then we shouldn't keep doing it. But that's the point, is that it's always a back and forth, that it doesn't just, they're doing it to solve it. They're doing it to accentuate and continue the problem for all of their benefit at your expense. So first, and obviously the point is that that's not the way this should be done, because then it will change with the next right of a pen from the next person in power, as I think is the point. But the main point for me, look, again, the pharmaceutical point, look, whether you want drugs at cheaper prices, look, you could have a very clear argument for why the astronomical prices of drugs in this country are a very clear constant. It's a problem. I mean, what they're doing is taking advantage of you. And there are places in the world that have a very different circumstance. But that's because of Canada, for example, because they do have a socialized concept of medicine. So is that what you're calling for? Because what's funny is a lot of people in this conversation are going, guys, that is exactly what you've been calling out. But now Trump wants it. So it's a good thing. And you go out of your way to make it in something that it's not. It's somehow a America first, nationalist idea because he says it. It's childish the way people respond. But none of those are my point. My point is, how is this in any way fighting Big Pharma? So the idea, and look, you shouldn't be taking any pharmaceutical drugs, in my opinion, at all. I know there are examples where things have at least arguably helped somebody with some kind of a problem, but the idea that the pharmaceuticals being given to you cheaper or some kind of a win outside of those that need them for, the elderly drugs or whatever else, guys, that's insane to me. The whole point was fighting Big Pharma. And now I'll go through these next tweets that will have them being framed as fighting Big Pharma. But here are Big Pharma drugs at cheaper cost. Now you could argue, because he's taken the money away from Big Pharma. Come on, guys. Are you really pretending because the prices are lowered here, that means that they're not making the same amount of money? Like, the reality being, just because these things are subsidized, guys, that's how this works, like with vaccines or anything else. And the problem is this incestuous relationship between Big Pharma and our government, not one side of it. Now, even if you don't agree with that, the bottom line is these things are dangerous, in my opinion. And the idea that we're supporting or praising getting more of them at cheaper cost, even if that is a win for you financially, it doesn't make sense to me. These things are dangerous, and we all generally seem to acknowledge that in most cases, other than when your side seems to want to do it. I just think that's wild to me. Now, on that note, Shannon Joy points out Trump has surrendered the tariff war to China. No wonder he's trying to dazzle everyone with lower prescription drug prices using socialist price controls, which, look, it's funny to me, the people that will now argue that is what they want or makes sense or that's America first. Outside of the idea that it's promoting, or rather giving, easier access to things that I don't think we should want, there is natural remedies for everything out there. I'm not a doctor, but look into it for yourself. It's interesting to me. But the people that would then now argue that this is something that is not what they've always been calling out, like with Biden, floated the same idea, socialism. It's just so constantly comical how sad, how clear people will only argue from a partisan position. The point is, that is exactly what we're talking about. And that does go against the idea of the constitutional dynamic of all of it. But my only real point in this is about how that's Big Pharma drugs being presented to you as a win. Sort of like the point they made with ivermectin, for crying out loud. Yes, I also acknowledge the obvious lies around it and how there were some clear benefits in the conversation what was going on. But my immediate instinct was, I'll let you decide that. Why am I going to promote another big pharma drug? Because that's what it is. It's interesting to me. But she goes, art of the deal, not so much. Refinance the debt, decouple from China, bring jobs back. These are all no's that aren't happening. Get rid of income tax, decrease trade deficit, increase costs, cause shortages, break supply chains. All checks, yes. So the point is, all the promises, no. And overall, more big pharma drugs. And the point she makes is that the sleight of hand, the dangly cat toy, the distraction, look over here because people don't, that the Trump administration doesn't want to be seen for doing something that doesn't align with what they said they would do, which is what David Icke is calling out here. News, U.S. and China agree to a 90-day pause on new tariffs after shipping to U.S. ports plummeted. So you could argue that's a loss in the trade war between China and the United States. It says U.S. tariff on Chinese imports will be cut from 125 to 30%. Chinese tariffs on U.S. imports will be cut from 125 to 10%. If tariffs are supposed to result in massive job growth and make the U.S. rich, why lower them? It's a good point. And as David Icke says, Trump is as a package the most incompetent, lying, corrupt, clueless, and constitution-destroying president in American history. And when you think of the competition, that is quite a feat. He creates the problem and then claims credit for partially responding to the problems and chaos that he created. He and his Soros Treasury Secretary have blatantly caved here in the face of pending disaster. His Art of the Deal, which he didn't write, he is incapable of reading a book, much less writing one. Clearly, he's unhappy with Trump. And it says, you've been so had MAGA and MAGA media that you are stuck with him now. Now, all his opinions aside, I mean, this is a joke. I'm adding tariffs and people, this will create jobs. Then he goes, I'm removing tariffs. The Art of the Deal. I'm adding tariffs. This will create jobs. I'm removing tariffs. Art of the Deal. So no matter what he does, he's winning, which is exactly the point of the partisan game today. So overall, you could argue that he did it because it wasn't working out. Okay, you don't have to jump down his throat but it's not about necessarily that he decided to go a different path because it wasn't working. Not everything they want to do works, but it's about the way they framed that is the case, right? And it's not unique to Trump. All of the partisans do it. The idea being that whatever he ends up doing was what he always wanted to do, and we won. That's politics. And we're going to make that more clear as we go through. But what's embarrassing is that people can't acknowledge that. And here's Alex Jones saying, President Trump announces he is set to sign one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. And he's referring to the one about pharmaceutical drugs. Really? You know, this is my point about all these people. Like, you couldn't have been a little bit more tactful with that? The most consequential in our history? Well, clearly that's what they want you to be saying right now. I mean, does anybody believe that? An executive order, first of all, which is easy to change with the next person in power, is the most consequential in our history? I mean, I'm embarrassed for people. Like, this is insanely silly. Certainly people will be happy about it in some context, but I mean, isn't he one of the people that were calling this around Biden socialism? It's just so silly. Like, I just don't, how do you take these things seriously from these people? It's everywhere. Here, Eric Dougherty does the same thing. Holy smokes, RFK Jr. just called out Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Oh, so he calls out the evil Democrats. So we must be winning. And now he's standing up to Big Pharma. Oh, he is he? Can you demonstrate where exactly? He says he can't be, the quote is, he can't be bought, unlike of most politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. Well, that's also one of these current narratives that's being circulated by everybody. Cotton just said on an interview, or was it Cotton or Hawley, Josh Hawley, saying, well, Trump's clearly rich. Who's not going to be bought off? Well, it's you keep hearing it. I'm sure you've heard it too. Just because someone's got a lot of money does not mean they can't be bought off. That's a stupid argument. Secondarily, it's not just about money. It's about influence. It's about being seen as the one winning. That's how these hubris-laden maniacs act. So the point is, here's RFK doing the same thing. He can't be bought. Says who? I find that impossible to believe, especially since he was already bought by the Rothschilds last time they bailed him out when he was bankrupt. But it says Elizabeth Warren and Robert Reich are saying that President Trump is on the side of the oligarchs. He literally is. He's on one of those sides. We're being run by different, I mean, honestly, you could argue they're at odds when it comes to who wants to be in power, but at the end of the day, I see all of them they're okay controlling your lives. They just want to be the one running the show. But it's oligarchs. It is elitists on either side of this. I mean, are we pretending that the people stacked in his cabinet aren't exactly that? I mean, look at what just happened at this recent meeting. Look at who was at his inauguration. It is the oligarchs of our country. And it says there has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than the President Trump. I mean, come on. These are silly things to say. You can argue he's doing it for the right reasons, but for crying out loud, Miriam Adelson was the over $200 billion or million, excuse me. And that is one of the Israeli oligarchs or any number of Silicon Valley oligarchs or Elon Musk himself. It's just silly. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President. Oh, that's so cute. The point is, guys, Big Pharma. How are you going to stand there? The major point today, those are statements. You can stand up there and say all you want. What's actually happening? Stargate, MMR shots, mRNA shots, self-amplifying shots, vaccines all around for everybody. The same childhood schedule. I mean, what about glyphosate? What about dioxins? What about 100 other examples that are under his purview that haven't even slowed down? In fact, they've increased. All of this relates to the same conversation. I don't see that happening. But that's sure fun to say out loud, isn't it, Eric? Here's Carl saying the same thing. Big Pharma's worst nightmare just came true. Donald Trump and RFK exposed a decades-long scam bleeding Americans dry. The room fell silent when Trump revealed why we pay 10 times more. Yeah, corruption exists pretty obviously. The bottom line is it is a win in a financial sense for people that need these drugs, in their minds anyway. Most of this country are being shoved and forced into things like antidepressants, antipsychotics, and that is the majority outside of the elderly side of it. They don't need or want those things if you really understand what's going on. 10 times more for Europe than Europe is the counterbalance. It's about trying to frame it as and that in and of itself sort of a false binary. But it says, you won't believe what you're about to hear. You can read it for yourself. I mean, to go into this and understand this, the aspect of it, who in this conversation has not been calling out over the years the astronomical prices of drugs in this country? And I can tell you why. It's because they were taking advantage of you, because your government was involved with all of this. Not one side of it, but all of it. And you can't stand there and tell us you're fighting Big Pharma while you roll out the largest AI mRNA injection platform in history from the White House. You just can't. Or, as RFK literally keeps telling you that MMR shots are safe and effective. You just can't. Now, here's some other examples of propaganda that I think are relevant. Now, this relates to the health side of it, but we're going to go over a few more points that I do think are very relevant. So, this has come to the overlap of the Grok kind of answer to this, but as I'll show you, you can look it up as you always should for yourself. So what's funny about this first, here's Jim Ferguson. You'll note very clearly the exact posting. And I mean, like literally the exact icons, the exact statements, grab everything. So just so it's clear, Alex Jones just literally copied this guy's post and shared it. Exactly the same thing. Doesn't that seem disingenuous and weird and almost a faux pas in its of itself? Yes, that's crazy. But the real point or question is, did he even look? Or did he just recognize that kind of a statement will get clicks and shares and reach? He says, New York State is trying to pass the same law. This is all coming out of the UN and Bill Gates. You mean the UN that they're currently aligned with, or the Bill Gates that's certainly working with Trump right now? Yeah, but I guess we'll leave that out of the conversation. They're plotting their next attack. Breaking, get out of the Washington state now, says Glenn Beck, who is just one of the other people in this same manipulative conversation. Washington governor signs sweeping emergency power law. Okay, of all people in this conversation, hopefully you know by now, but you shouldn't blindly, you should always question me and especially and everybody else too. But you should know by now that my point is, if it's about these kind of things, I'll be the emergency powers, medical apartheid. We will call these things out. So first, understand that Washington, like every other state in this country, especially from a federal level on top of that, have these things in place already. If you don't know that by now, you're being played by somebody like Jones. The reality is that there are many different examples of conservative and liberal states with openings for them to do what they want should there be a medical emergency, whatever they call that. What I find so interesting is that I'll read this directly from the bill and you tell me that this is not a hyperbolic framing of something that otherwise actually exists. So ask yourself how that even makes sense. But I'll just read through it. Medical mandates without consent on the table. Yeah, that's already the reality. That's not a Democrat thing, guys. We just lived through this. So first, This is interesting. And as I'll show you with all the rest, you could read these all for yourself, and I'll go through the actual data, right? These are all these. The point is, despite it being from Grok, you should absolutely read the source material and then look outside of what they're presenting and compare the information, which I will do every single time we talk about these. The point was simply, did Washington state governors sign a sweeping emergency powers law, right? Just a simple question, just to give me a starting point. That's what we're going to talk about more tomorrow, about like the name of the bill and so on. Because especially today, the Googles and everything else in the world, even Brave for that matter, it seems like nearly impossible half the time to get what you're looking for instead they give you what they think you're looking for, right? And it never seems to be what we're actually finding. So first, here's what Grok says. Now, again, for you guys didn't hear the beginning of the show, the reason that I think it's important to put this in this conversation is because the people like Jones and the rest, despite him in what we'll get to, the whole Coke Gate conversation, calling out Grok, or at least saying that it's usually pretty good, except this time was wrong. You know, it wasn't. I'll show you. The point is that from the conservative perspective, it somehow holds a lot more, influence, gravitas, whatever you want to call it. Like it's respected because it's Elon's thing. It should just be another tool, and you should look into it for yourself every time. So he's saying that there's a new bill, first of all, which there is, and I'll show it to you, but claiming that it is sweeping emergency powers, that you can force you to do whatever they want and all this different stuff, which again, already exists. But here's what it says on Grok. There is no evidence that Washington State Governor Bob Ferguson signed a sweeping emergency powers law in 2025. Recent claims, particularly from posts on X, suggest that such a law was passed, granting the governor executive powers during medical crises, including forced medical interventions based on scientific powers. However, these claims appear misleading or exaggerated. Now, Grok can be wrong. It has been wrong. But I find it fascinating that at the same time you have them making these claims, which many times they are lying, you find Grok challenging that. So there's only one of two ways to take this every single time. And we'll go through it in a second. Either you have to acknowledge that Grok is wrong, which means it's being misused. It's not an accident, guys. That's what even there's plenty. I think it was the 7 C's making that point, like where it's you have to force it to acknowledge that it's wrong. And half the time, oh, you're right. That's dishonesty. That's not an accident, in my opinion. But secondarily, or they're wrong. And the Grok is showing you information. We're in a world today where it seems to not matter anymore. But it says the current legal framework for the governor's emergency powers in Washington state is governed by RCW 4306-2022-20, which has been in place since 1969 and was last amended in 2019. This law grants the governor broad authority to declare a state emergency, which again, you look these up in pretty much every place they exist, even in Republican locations. These powers include prohibiting gatherings, restricting, which I, by the way, do not agree with, in case that wasn't clear. The idea that they can just shut down. Look, it's the same point about the constitutional issue right now. There is no asterisk next to the Constitution. They don't say unless there's a pandemic or unless we claim you're invading or unless we claim you're a brown person from another country. You always have to prove those things. We'll get to that in a minute. Even the idea of an invading force, first of all, which you can clearly prove that's not what they're dealing with, despite the broad claim that somehow they were all let in by Biden, which still would not make them an invading force. It's insane. The point is that if you're going to claim they're part of a terrorist organization or an invading force, they have to prove that. It's the same point, which then amounts to due process by them saying, look, he's part of a terrorist organization. Then they can be deported. Because the argument being made today is that somehow that is the one of the it's just funny how just like from Israel, the narrative evolves. As you prove they're lying in step one, they go, oh, well, but step two, though. It's like, okay, but you just got caught lying. It never ends. But so the point here is I disagree with all of this. The idea that they can just circumvent your rights because of some kind of emergency is not the reality of the Constitution. Now, it says some Twitter post reference a supposed new law, ESHB 1531, related to public health measures for communicable diseases. However, no public available records confirm that it was passed or signed into law, and the bill details remain unclear. The claims about forced treatments or detentions seem to stem from misinterpretations of existing powers under RCW. Speculative narratives are not grounded in legislative records. 2025, Governor Ferguson expressed willingness to limit his emergency powers voluntarily. All these you'll find if you look this stuff up. In summary, it says no new sweeping emergency powers law has been signed in Washington state as of May 14, 2025. Interesting. Now here is something that I found. March 8th, 2025. Okay, so what we're seeing here, or was the date on it? In May, and saying that there is no emergency powers law in 2025. This says engross, and this is the bill we're discussing, Bill 1531 from March 8th, 2025. And it says, an act relating to preserving the ability of public officials to address communicable diseases using scientifically proven measures to control the spread of such diseases. So obviously, the first point is that this is, in my opinion, always what amounts to whatever we're talking about, right? That they can do what's necessary, which applies literally in every state we have. And it's not, let me go through it. Adding a new section to chapter so-and-so, we're creating a new section and declaring an emergency. But it says the legislature finds that communicable diseases remain a real threat to our communities, and many are increasing in prevalence and so on. So just kind of setting the tone. The H1N1 virus or avian flu remains a nationwide threat. Remember, these are the shots that the current administration are fast tracking. Contracting the illness due to exposure. Again, they're just saying how bad this is. Then it says, to address these challenges, the ability for state and local health officials to educate the public about evidence-based measures that use the best available science is critical to control the spread of diseases. Okay. So clearly does not say what they're framing it as so far, if this is even the correct thing you're pointing at. It says, therefore, the legislature intends to ensure that the public receives timely, well-researched, evidence-based, and science-driven information to make informed. Nowhere does it so far say that you have to force in what they're telling you. They're saying use best available science to control the spread, which I'm not going to say doesn't amount to the idea that they would force something in, but they don't need that statement to do that. So far, it seems to be not what's being framed. The legislature does not intend by this enactment to modify, limit, or expand any existing or established new requirements for individuals to receive any vaccine or take any measure. Okay, that seems to be the opposite. Nor does the legislature intend by this enforcement to modify, limit, or expand any existing authority or grant any new authority to establish such a program. Okay, that's pretty clearly not what they're saying. A new section is added to Chapter 70. It says, it is the policy of the state that public health responses to address communicable diseases be guided by the best available science. The same thing is set up there. To control the spread of diseases. Consistent with the policy in subsection 1 of this section, the state and local health officials must, within available resources, implement and promote evidence-based, which doesn't necessarily mean they can't lie about it, appropriate measures to control the spread, which, guys, is literally everywhere. Which we know what that can be contorted into, including immunizations, vaccines. But it says any such statute or policy in place affecting the state is hereby declared null and void. That's it. Okay. I mean, I was skimming through it. Read it for yourself. So there's two ways to look at this for me. Now let's do this first, actually. So you can hear the way that they're framing this. So there's two ways to look at it. Either Grok is framing this in the sense that it is not what they're claiming it is, therefore it doesn't apply to the way they frame it, or they're wrong, which is why I wanted to show this. So here is, wherever it was, here we go. Here's Glenn Beck.
Living in Washington State, may I just say, get the hell out now. I've said
the
that
entire state?
The entire state. Get out of the state.
Wow.
And I'm dead serious on that. You're living in a state that has gone absolutely insane. First of all, we talked about this before, and nobody's really talking about this. The medical thing that they just passed in Washington State, and they passed it, and the governor has signed it. And basically it says, if there's a medical emergency, we can do whatever we want to you. Now, remember, this is the state that was talking about building like little internment camps for people who wouldn't get vaccinated last time. Okay? They were talking about that. If you think that they won't do that, you're out of your mind. You're crazy. And so it says, if the governor decides that there's a medical emergency, a statewide emergency, that the state, based on, I love this one, based on scientific experts, they will dictate what happens to every individual. What you have to get. If scientific experts tell you you have to take this, you will be forced to take that.
What a gross misrepresentation this is. Like, what's insane to me is we have so many examples of very, very obvious legislation that goes way far. And you read this, and it's basically, you're taking things that basically state that we'll take science-based evidence and do what it makes sense to suppress this, which obviously could be contorted into whatever they want it to be. But that's what you turn into this major big, this bombastic idea about, that I just feel like that's almost meant to be disingenuous for some nefarious reason. Despite the obvious that they could do that if they want to, and they already have, and the information is already like right now. Let's be clear: Donald Trump has already overlapped with the Davos UN World Economic Forum conversation, which are absolutely of the mind that the UN should be able to dictate these things on a global scale. Now, that is not what's being fought right now. Clearly, they're leaning into the globalist direction in every way we can see. I'm sure people disagree with that, but look at what's actually happening, not the words coming out of their mouths. So I find it interesting to me that that's being framed, of course, because it's Washington, because it's about a left-right paradigm dynamic. Not that you can't show this exact same language, even worse, by the way, in Florida right now. We're talking about lockdowns and just we know those are there. So taking one over here that is clearly less the way it's written, it seems far less dangerous, even though, again, these things can be used however they want them to. I just think that's really interesting to me. Now, the part on top of that was this being reshared exactly from Alex, which I don't think I wonder if they even checked this stuff. But again, medical mandates without consent, it didn't say that at all. No public vote on clear limit, didn't say that at all. And yes, this is the state that once proposed quarantine camp. I just think that's weird. Now, please do not take this as me not being concerned about how the state and the government can abuse these situations. I just think this is a weird pull. And then the main point is, while the current administration they both support is the one rushing forward the very things they might force down your throat. We got to be smarter than this, guys. Partisan politics are going to be the end of us. Now, on that very note, here's Cat Turd saying delusional because this girl, which you don't have to listen to, but she says, basically saying that Trump supporters are regretting their vote. This person says, this Karen thinks Trump supporters. No, it's just funny to me. Like, just because they're so desperate to maintain their facade, it's so transparent that many partisans on all sides are becoming disillusioned with the whole thing. And especially right now, what people like Katzer are blind, like lockstep supporters of this administration, as they've been made clear in response to other people. But if you can't call out the Stargate program, MR shots, mRNA shots, and many other directions that have gone against what they promised, and you can't acknowledge that it's just some people that would be a break, right? The Maha group and so on. But no, to them, there's no way. She's just a Karen and a Democrat. Obviously, there are people on all sides that are shifting. But this person says, and that's what I want to show you, don't know one person that voted for him that regrets it or would change their mind. Well, I mean, that's certainly possible. It doesn't mean it's not true. What's interesting is they exist. You damn well know it. It's everywhere you talk. My opinion is more people than not just recognizing that all of them are lying to them. And that's what makes it so difficult for people that are trapped in the left-right paradigm to engage with that. Because the only thing they can do is say, you must be on the other side. And that's not the case. But this person says, well, I don't know any person who died from the COVID vaccine, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. He says, well, that's not the point at hand. It's an obvious overlapping reference. I do know two people that definitely died from the jab. Sure, there may be a few Trump regrets, but I have yet to find one. I know a lot more Democrats that are seeing reality. The Democrat Party is not the same party I grew up with. I was, voted for Democrat and so on. This is extreme radicals that have overtaken the party. And yeah, I agree 100%, just like on the right. They control majority of the media, so they still have people that will just follow. If your eyes aren't open to all the liberal craziness, you don't see it as a problem. But see, here's the point. We do see it, bud. That's the point. We do see it. I see it, but you can't see both of them. What's more likely, right? That both sides say we can't see the other. And the reality is that we can see it on all sides of this, because if you're paying attention, you can. How do you not acknowledge the lunacy taking place in the current administration? Like, just so over the top. It's such a crazy cartoonish direction that's been taken. But if you look at what happened during COVID, it's no different than the left. It's the same thing. And he says, you are part of the problem. They are doing everything possible to keep the numbers for the next census to shift. They are evil and will stop at nothing for power. You're describing the government on all sides. But this guy says, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. You see, this is where it becomes interesting to see how people engage with the person that's going, look, they're both dumb. And says, I'm an independent voter, and I voted for Trump 3 times. This Trump isn't the same Trump from the first term. So he's telling you, I'm one of those people that regrets this. I voted for Trump, America First, for better economy, mass deportation. So far, I haven't seen it. Here's how he responds. Oh, and we have a Congress that does nothing either. It's just ignored it. He can only do so much by himself. That's the response. right? So the guy tells you, I am what you say doesn't exist. I don't think he's done what he said. Oh, well, he can't do it all by himself. Well, so now you're acknowledging that he didn't do it? I thought you just said that wasn't the case. It's just, it's like a goalpost moving is like an art right now. That's just not even, I should call it an art. It's clumsy. But if he can't do it by himself, then you just admitted that it's not actually fully what you claimed it was. And I think that's the biggest problem. It becomes, well, he's only one man. Or, oh, it can't all happen at once. Nobody said that. We got both chambers in the presidency. They bring a lawsuit to slow everything down. See, the point is, yeah, you've got unprecedented, more control than usual, and you still can't get these things done. And I'm trying through the regular channels. This isn't the Trump from the first term. He goes, he's smarter now. He knows exactly how these evil people work. Wow. This person says, I don't trust Elon and the tech bros from Silicon Valley. I didn't like it when Elon attacked us about H-1B visas, and Trump didn't defend us from Elon's attacks. Remember, he censored people. And I can keep going and going. I wish everything goes okay, and I hope I'm totally wrong by the end of this term. But he goes, see this. So instead of acknowledging and engaging with the points he laid out, he goes, brought to you by the Democrats, and shows you a junkie town. Which, yeah, that's disgusting. And Democrats should be held accountable for what they've done to their towns. Yes. But what it's one half of the story. And he goes, this is what open borders gets you. Third world country. This is the USA. And there are many other cities just as bad. Yeah, some of the Republican ones too. Thank God for Trump right now. You're not going to win with this. It's not going to happen. And he goes, oh, I know what the Democrats are doing. And that's why I voted for Trump for mass deportations. By the way, I don't hate Elon. He scares me, just like Bill Gates. Watch this video so you can understand a little bit of the tech bros. And here's the crux of the point. Bill Gates is evil. Elon is not evil. Huge difference. That guy has faith. Like it's a religion. You believe in somebody. So that means it doesn't matter what he shows you. Well, he's just not evil. So as long as he's doing it, I'm okay. This is the crux of the problem in a lot of people. I think, honestly, probably the lowest common, the people that are easiest to manipulate, but you are acting. So as long as it's my guy doing it, it's not a problem because he's not evil. And you know that. Why? Because you know Elon Musk, because you grew up with him? Most likely not. Because you've chosen to agree and side with the person who's convinced you that they are what you want. You know, sort of like politicians do all the time and lie about it. But not this time because he's not an evil guy. Or he's a Christian and I know it. He's a good person. Well, not according to their books, but you know, what do I know? I just don't take them at face value when people say things out loud. I look for facts. But this is literally everywhere. But delusional that anybody might change their mind based on all the things that aren't happening. And this is the only thing they've got. He says, if Kamala had won, our country would be over by now. Would be over by now? What does that even mean? Is that some lazy half version of what Elon was saying the whole time? That the country would cease to exist if hardly. Either person that won would take us to this exact point. That seems pretty clear by now. And of course, because now the deviation is that somehow the Trump's going to make peace with Palestine. Well, how about we wait and see what actually happens again before words are shouted out? Let's wait to see what he does. I find it hard to believe that's going to be different. But the point is, if she had won, it would have been worse. Well, you can't possibly know that, but that's the only argument you got. And I said, this is the best they can do. You know, sort of like saying it would have been worse had I not had the COVID shot. Very similar. I said, you are the Democrats that you hate so much. Hashtag two-party politics, hashtag team sport politics. Two-party illusion, excuse me. I mean, guys, it's the same. How much he in particular made fun of Democrats for saying, oh, I would have been so much more sick or, you know, had many more problems if I hadn't got the shot. And we laugh and laugh because, oh my God, you are that person right now, Catcher. You are that person. It would have been worse because we didn't get what we wanted. Because you don't say things like that if you don't know it's going the wrong direction. You wouldn't need to, if this was the golden age and everyone was happy and every Republican loved Trump, you wouldn't need to say things like that. They know it, guys. They're in damage control. And that's why they're desperate, I think. But I think a lot of what we're seeing is drudging up old things that we all know. Now, I shouldn't say all. There's plenty of people out there that don't. Someone always doesn't know something. But in the core grouping of the people that support or are around these conversations, and Tucker or mainstream alternative media, or hopefully the honest independent media, the point is that they're rehashing. He just went over the World Trade Center 7, Building 7. And even his own audience was like, about time. It's like, what? This is so obvious. And here we are again. And this is Adam saying, This is Kurt Weldon, former U.S. congressman, saying Gaddafi gave me his resignation letter. The U.S. didn't want Gaddafi to resign. They wanted to kill him. They wanted his oil, and they wanted control of his sovereign wealth. Yeah, no duh. I mean, it's these are transparent conversations for people that cared to look beyond the current government narrative at the time. And breaking news, and here's my joke about it. I said, so based on this pattern, we will likely be hearing all about the Zionist globalist technocratic takeover of the United States on the Tucker Carlson show. But in about 10 years, once it's all set firmly in place. And it will be a bombshell. That's where we are, in my opinion. I think it's quite obvious that this is, whether he knows it or not, is the formula. Where, ask yourself right now, like that would have been monumentally important. I mean, it is either way, guys. Again, the question is, isn't it still a good thing that it's, yes, always. That anybody might be introduced to this for, that had never seen it before. Yes, that's a good thing. The question is, even as it is a good thing, is it still not possible, or you should ask yourself whether it is happening, that they're using the truth to trip you into something new or to pacify new people or to make you think he's on your side, whatever. The answer is yes, it's obviously possible. So in this case, we're talking, very recently, like in the midst of all what's going on with Syria, for example, it would have been monumentally more important to understand what they did in Libya. Today, it still is, like I said, but they're on a new arm of all of this, guys. Syria's taken over. They're in a new direction. So now it's okay for them to use this for something else or see it however you want. It's old news. Here's Alex Jones. Breaking news, May 13th. Alex Jones breaks down how Netanyahu and the globalist neocon deep state were the hidden specters who created Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Oh my God, bombshell. I mean, really? Like, look, I'm not going to pretend he hasn't in the past pointed out two things. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, U.S. government connections when it was against the party he didn't like, ignores it when it's the party he likes. Also, the Israel connection, way before. He used to point that out. Now he pretends like it doesn't exist. Oh, except recently when now suddenly he's being given the allowance to start calling out Israel again for obvious reasons, but not all of it. Netanyahu in particular. That's the point. Which makes me think it's about getting Netanyahu out of the way and that they're making agreements to basically roll him out of the way and keep the agenda going, which he'll support and call it some kind of freedom 1776 in Israel, whatever. The point is two things: that the idea that you're breaking the story about specters of, if you don't know by now that the Israeli government, the U.S. government are the creators of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they go back as far as, the receipts are transparent. What's on top of that is he's been calling out the globalist China. Okay, for the first time that I've seen, Netanyahu and the globalist deep state. So now Netanyahu's part of the globalist agenda? How does that make sense with what you said 30 seconds ago? Just if you pay attention for half a second and hold them to account, like any politician, for example, it becomes very clear these people are shifty, they're lying, they're deceiving you, or they don't even know and they don't even care. Bottom line is, guys, these things are not honest with what we've already seen going on. And here is the guy that he supports shaking hands with the leader of Al-Qaeda, or whatever you want to pretend this dynamic is. I mean, the point is, this person is the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Al-Qaeda offshoot. This is Al-Qaeda. This is the guy that they had on a bounty for $10 million until he took over Syria, and Israel got what it wanted, and they just took it off. And Israel took over Syria, and they're building bases, and they're murdering, and these people are ethnically cleansing Christians, Muslims, people all over the country. That is what they support. But Alex Jones wants you to think he's breaking the story about how Al-Qaeda was being influenced. I mean, look at this. Just compare these two shots. All right? You've got the idea that Netanyahu and the globalist deep state were the hidden specters, and he's breaking down the influence on Israel, on, 9/11, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Okay. And then you have Donald Trump shaking the hand of one of the leaders of that group. Doesn't that seem a little bit stupid? But see, the difference is we're supposed to forget that this guy's not al-Jawani. He's the leader of Syria now. It's embarrassing. And Rachel Blevins, because she's honest, and just like that, the fake president of Syria shakes hands with the guy who declared the illegal occupation of the Golan Heights part of Israel, which was illegal. It's now called Trump Heights. And the guy who claims he defeated ISIS shakes hands with al-Baghdadi's favorite student. We can't be this easy to fool. Oh, and let's not forget that we covered this already on the 10th of December, 2024. which was that as Israel further occupies Syria, Western-backed ISIS patch-wearing terrorists begin executions. These were publicly posted. Check this image for yourself, the main image. That's a recent image from Syria. And these are people supported by Israel. Same with on the left. I mean, you can't hide this stuff anymore. They're openly doing this now, and they're just leaning in with the guy because that's their new person. It shouldn't surprise you. The masks are being taken off. You realize the whole point about going to Saudi Arabia is an autocratic, despotic regime. It is authoritarian. It is insane that we pretend like that's okay, but you're going to attack Iran or you're going to go after people that are far different, better even in plenty of ways. Like, just if you're going to try to criticize Muslims even at large and not call out your relationship with Saudi Arabia, it's insane how obvious that contradiction is. And we all pretend like it doesn't exist because there's a very big problem happening right now. Or here's another bombshell for you that Dominic wants you to understand. Breaking news. Matt Gaetz says Israel lobby has tremendous power over the U.S. government, and if you oppose the U.S. relationship with Israel, it's impossible to hold office. Wow, I'm floored. I mean, can you not really take a second and reflect on how silly it is for Matt Gaetz to come out and say the thing that we've all been screaming at him and everybody else? Now that it's now become a near daily constant conversation, even if it's just to shout it down as anti-Semitic, it is everywhere. You're so brave, Matt Gaetz. What's funny is he goes in this weird podcast, which look at this. White sheets behind him, a couple of card tables, this guy with a mask on. Like, I don't know if it's a parody or something, but what the hell is that? And yes, in this discussion, he literally says that they have tremendous power over which is true. Yes, I think they outright control the U.S. government at this point. I don't know how we don't see that. Now, I could be wrong on the amount of control, but if we don't acknowledge by now the Zionist influence over this government, you are lying to yourself or you're dishonest or uninformed. But what's insane to me is that's what's being stated now. So now, overlapping with the Israel point, things are starting to, not suddenly, or I guess not slowly, but suddenly shifting. Like on a dime, all of a sudden, it's okay to call these things out. I don't think it's because anything's actually shifting, guys. They know you see it. They know we all do. And the cat turds and DC Dranos are not enough to hold off the crowd. So they have to shift it. Here's another example, just on an interesting thing coming back up. Now, Mike Benz randomly came out on the 12th and goes, I can't unsee this video. But no indication that it's new or that it's an old video. This video is old. Excuse me. We talked about this in a show we did in 2023. And in that point, it was like it was years old. Now, that's not the point. It's still important to call out and talk about. But it's weird to me how these things get pointed at by somebody like Mike Benz, which is important to think about, and then it reverberates through the conversation. Jimmy Dore picks it up and makes a brand new video about it. And it's like, breaking news. It's very weird. Lyme disease came from bioweapon science. Well, yes, it's old information. I'm glad it's being talked about. Jimmy Dore probably informed people. I believe he's talked about it before. But I just think it's weird, isn't it? How much this continues to happen. And to one of the most ridiculous. Alex Jones puts this out. Attempts by Reuters to cover up cocaine gate has now triggered a massive Streisand effect. This is wild to me. Now I'm going to go through this. Where's the videos? Right there. You tell me what you think. Now, see, this is my point from earlier. This may be meaningless, right? I decided to put some time on it today just because I think it's actually really incredible to me that somebody with this much influence is either this bad at what they do or choosing to lie to you in such a flimsy way for something. I don't know, but it's wild to me. And it really is a standout point in all this. And I've been calling out this since the recent election because of how much it is influencing average people. But so here, I simply said, this appears to be an IQ test. Let me show you why. Before I play this video, Michael Tracy points out something. I think this was, let's see what the date was. Yeah, May 12th. Yeah, I think later in the day he posted this and says, I saw it on the 13th. He says, search cocaine on Twitter right now, and you'll see endless slop tweets reporting Macron, Starmer, and Mers were caught with a bag of cocaine. But if you do a 30 seconds of checking and look at the high-res photos, which are easy to find, by the way, we'll show you, you'll see it's actually a tissue or a napkin. This site's become an algorithmic wasteland. Now, it may be the point, though. Now, is it possible they were doing cocaine? Obviously. I mean, I'm willing to bet you they probably do. I mean, these people are not what they pretend to be. But we'll watch the clip. And the argument, the game that you're going to pretend that they just left this there or it was an accident. Obviously it's possible. But it seems wildly unlikely. But then when you just look, as opposed to either being handed a false image that he takes at face value or altering it himself, it's very clear what this is. And we'll go through this. You can look more yourself. These aren't even the best images. And I simply said, I agree. This person says, the fact is, this action was deliberately staged, his opinion, staged by Murs, Macron, and Starmer. It was intended to create precisely this impression. And that's another way to think about it, right? And it's a sure win that the internet idiots won't understand it and will rant about how they had a Coke party on the train. Complete nonsense, he argues. In Europe, they want to crack down on disinformation and hate speech online. And that's exactly what they delivered. In France and Germany, the governments have already hinted at this after the incident, using this very incident to say this is why we have to censor the internet. There's something coming against Twitter. Think about that. This person's a good point. All the world's a stage. So this is my thing about so if you're not willing to at least consider that, then you're part of the problem, right? The idea is very obviously that could have been the very point. Then you should ask, if you believe that, or if you can consider that, whether Alex Jones knows that and doesn't care, or is an unwitting tool in this manipulation. I think it's the former, quite frankly. I think we're at a point where this is how they're being used, and it's about creating the next step for whatever they're trying to do, the technocratic control structure they're building out. Maybe he pretends that's going to help fight the Democrats off, or whatever he does. Who knows? This is an insane conversation. Now, here's Alex again. He has tripled down in this conversation. That picture, as far as I could tell, is straight up fake or altered. He says, you can clearly see it's a bag of blow. And here is another post, developing scandal. Truth Justice says, the picture Alex Jones is using in the above post is not the original photo taken in the meeting. Look at the official press picture on the right and compare it to the details in the picture on the left. Alex is digging in because he's gone too far to say he's wrong, or the agenda was to lie to you. That's possible too. It says, but he is wrong. The item in question are tissues and a bamboo knot cocktail pick. They were just removing the garbage off the table for the pictures. That's it. Maybe they do cocaine. They probably do. My point as well. But this was not cocaine, and that was not a spoon. They actually are claiming that's a Coke spoon, too. I don't think these criminals, I don't like these criminals, but we have to fight for truth no matter what it is. Exactly. So this is where it gets even more interesting. This is the point about Grok. This person says, Grok, is this real? Here's what Grok says. And this is, he calls this out. He goes, and I'm going to play this next. He goes, the claim that Macron, Murs, and Starmer were caught with cocaine on a train to Kiev on May 9, 2025 appears to be false. French media, like Liberation and international outlets such as India Today, have debunked it, identifying the white powder as a handkerchief with the spoon as a toothpick based on high-quality images that you can look up for yourself. The rumor, fueled by Alex Jones and Russian officials like Maria Zakharova, interesting, not that I think there's anything necessarily to that, lacks solid evidence and seems tied to a disinformation campaign. While the viral video sparked debate, credible sources lean toward the objects being innocuous, highlighting the spread of misinformation on social media. Oh, look at that. Now, just whether you agree with whether Grok's wrong or not, isn't that fascinating to see Grok at this point when they're the way they've leaned into this whole thing? And now I just find that interesting. Now, one thing I want you to note, we'll come back to, is what this reads. The claim that they were caught with cocaine is false. Interesting. We'll come back to that. Here's what Alex says. And he doubled down, right? He posted this in the 11th, and then on the 11th again, attempts to cover this up. Here's what he says.
Something incredible happened today. Macron, Starmer, and Murs were doing a train tour of Ukraine, trying to drum up support to keep the war going. And the press gets invited.
Oh, by the way, the war that Alex said ended a couple months ago. 100%.
Into their train car, and suddenly they look around and start moving things quickly, furtively trying to hide them. And when you zoom in, it looks like a little cocaine spoon, a little paper of cocaine. And all of them look like they're lit up like Christmas trees.
That's wildly subjective. Now, the one thing I'll point out is the way he grabbed that did seem, it would stand out. But maybe he just didn't want the napkin on the table because I don't know. Or it's cocaine. I don't know. What's funny is every other part of this doesn't add up. And I think it's incredible how this is going forward.
But regardless of what you think happened there, whether they were hiding cocaine or something else, maybe just cleaning some.
All right. So the point is, that's all you get. The basis of the evidence is that they have something on the table that he grabbed quickly. And they looked all lit up, which to me, they didn't at all. It's just funny how much you can make of a story. And now, as it goes forward and people dispute it, what exactly is he using to argue that he knows that they're wrong? His eyes in a video that we've all seen? Guys, this is part of this. This is the mainstream alternative media. There's something to this, like muddying the waters with nonsensical BS. Like that is like Orwellian in a very clear way. Like we are being driven into this. And maybe he doesn't know that. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't care. As always, guys, let's not forget the many people that have left them, like David Knight and Greg Reese and True Street Media guys and David and Richard Grove. And all of them tell you the same thing, that they don't check their sources and that they're, exactly what we're discussing. Like David Knight and Greg Reese call him out constantly. I mean, it's very clear this person is not to be trusted based on people that they've worked with. But that's for everybody. Question everybody. And if you do that, you'd already know.
Trash up real quickly. It's the media, the corporate media response that's really revealing. I just reposted the video 4 or 5 hours ago. It's already got like 8 million views. And I noticed that Grok came in and said, hey, this has been fact checked. This isn't even a real video, which they admit is a real video. They're saying the interpretation isn't accurate.
So this is fascinating to me. Now, let's remember it's an AI, okay? I just showed you the one that I had that says that the claim is unreal. Here's what the Grok responded to this person who somebody else is asking for. I'm wondering if I can even find that to show you exactly what it says. Yeah, that's funny. Okay, we got to come back to this. There's a ton of these below. Okay, so here's what it says. The one he's showing you. The video claiming Macron, Starmer, and Mers were involved in a cocaine scandal during their Kiev trip is not real. Now, you could easily read that both ways. If you look at every other response that's given, it seems to be arguing that the claim is not real. But in this case, they're saying this is fact checks show the alleged cocaine was a tissue. Same thing. These claims spread by conspiracy accounts or misinformation. Similarly, allegations about Zelensky's drug use are false, which my opinion, that's not true. But I also can't prove that he's using cocaine. This is about being objectively honest. You could argue that's false, but if we can't prove it, then we're just disputing our opinions. But it says the leaders were on a diplomatic mission to Ukraine with no evidence of any scandal. So these really fixating on the fact that their Grok is claiming that the video wasn't even real. I don't believe that's what it's actually saying. I believe that's just simply the way the AI put the sentence out, and it's backed up by every other post we're going to see. But I'll let him continue.
Grok just says, and usually Grok's pretty good. Oh, no, it's fake. Reuters says the video's fake.
That's not what Reuters
they're saying our interpretation.
That's not what Reuters said. That's the reality. So what Grok is saying is that that's a false claim. I'll show you the rest of it. But see, this is the whole linchpin of this argument.
Is wrong. Now, think about this. This is Reuters that got caught getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the Biden administration to target Elon Musk, his company, his family for destruction the last.
Oh, and here we go. Hopefully you remember this one. See, it's important that we're on these stories because this one might have flown to the radar. We nailed this to the ground when they lied about it last time. We'll come back to it.
4 years. And then it also got Pentagon money for widespread deception operations. And then Reuters reported on itself on that. So, but we don't mean that when we say that.
Okay. So let's break this down. So you start with a claim that we can show you is false. He's trying to tell you that it's not, but his only point is not trying to get into the nuance of how he can prove that's even cocaine, because he can't do that. It's that he argues the Grok's response, which it's just Grok, right? If the whole point is Grok is just an AI, we shouldn't trust it. That's what he's doing. But so Grok says that Reuters claims the video is false. And then from that point, even though Reuters not claiming that, he then goes on to make the argument that here's why Reuters can't be trusted, which who trusts Reuters? It's corporate media. But what he says about it to make the case is false, or rather wildly dishonest and manipulated, as we'll go through right now and show you. First of all, the main point there about the deception campaign. Yes, that was the Thomson Reuters So the Reuters news division is one element of the larger company. And we went over all this. And yes, does it matter that they gave the Reuters Thomas LLC or whatever it is that money? Yes, of course it does. But here's what you should understand, that historically, more than once, and well through Trump's last administration, that money was going to that group. And secondarily, that it was for regularly repeated defense contracts. So for them to somehow make this into a current Biden thing, and they did it to deceive everybody, if you're going to make the case, then that means they were all doing it, including Trump too. And they'll never get into this. But so back to this story, you go into an already manipulated story to try to make the argument that Reuters is dishonest, which, fine. No one's going to dispute that. Did they make the argument that that's why what Reuters said that Grok reported was somehow wrong, even though that was not the case? That's the best you got?
This is the ultimate gaslighting, ladies and gentlemen. Then you have Zelensky.
You're damn right it is. Now, just so it's clear, he then goes on for most of the rest of the video to talk about Zelensky. Where was it? So Zelensky and smoking and just cocaine allegations.
Everybody to look at and make their own decision. And that's what broadcasts like mine are. It's punditry, it's analysis, it's opinion, and it's journalists that we have on that have broken major stories. And then the public watches us and does their own research and decides, are we a credible source that tries to tell the truth? Was Alex Jones right? Am I tomorrow's news today?
Yeah, but see, here's the difference, bud. You're stressing this is absolute fact. This is the same game they try to play. This is people trying to emulate what honest people are doing out there, right? The idea that you could act like you didn't just scream that this was absolute, and now you're acting like, well, you tell us what you think and whether or not we're for sure. You're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. That's what this is. That's why seemingly everybody is calling these people out right now. David Icke has been calling him out for a very long time. Don't forget, Bill Cooper called him an absolute manipulator way back when. And it's amazing these things don't continue to collect. So, to the point, here's what it actually says again, the one that we were showing you. And I'll show you the rest of them. We can go through them. The claim that Macron and Starmer and Mers were caught with cocaine on a train appears to be false. French media, and we read the rest of it. So, if the best you can do is try to take out of context what it appears to be Grok was saying. If, by the way, that was a screenshot. What he showed you was a screenshot. So, how do we even know that's real? Which, by the way, is actually an important point to make.
And the answer.
This. All we got was a screenshot.
This has been fact checked.
Now, I'm not necessarily trying to suggest that it's false. For all we know, it's not. For all we know, this is exactly, what it looks like. But let's be clear. Twitter files got people blindly trusting screenshots, right? So here you can see it. So let's go to the next one. Well, let me play this again real quick. No, we're good. Okay. So I was going to have to grab something, but so here is one of the other ones. And you can see that a lot of people are asking, look, those are all the Groks down there. So let's look at all of them and compare to the one he was showing you. This one, again, says the claim that Macron was caught on a train is false. Okay, let's see what this one says. Based on the evidence, the object in the image is most likely a handkerchief, not a plastic bag. Credible sources like, okay, so it doesn't even mention that. Next one says, I appreciate, this one says, Grok, you need to learn how, this is also what's funny. So they're telling you, no, that's not what it is. Okay. And then it says, you need to learn to think critically about the sources you quote blindly as the truth, or you are actually just not useful anymore. So when you don't get the answer you want, you criticize and go, you're not looking at the sources I like, which is just funny to me. It's just, so people like this are blindly accepting this as long as it aligns with their worldview. And then suddenly it says something you don't agree with and you go, well, I disagree with what you're okay, here's how it responds. I appreciate your call for critical thinking. The rumor that Macron and the rest of them with cocaine on a train has been debated heavily. Credible outlets, which you could debate whether they're credible or not, I don't think so, analyzed high-quality footage, and the point is, a lot of them have. Reuters and plenty of others, the point is clearly this is not actually what it appears to be. And then it says, I've never seen a handkerchief that looks like a cellophane bag. That's because either Alex or whoever gave him the image altered the image. And then it says, I understand your skepticism about the object in the video. Credible sources, like French media, have identified it as a rolled-up handkerchief in support of. So you could argue they're lying, but it goes on and on and on. And they just keep trying to give it and contort it and get more information until they get what they want from it. So here is what I think is important about the Reuters aspect. So at the same time, on the 13th, he comes out and says, global bombshell. Learn why President Trump banned Reuters and Bloomberg after discovering they had front groups for deep state Western intelligence. Yeah, probably all of them, right? Except that's a problem, though. You know why? So how exactly is that possible, Alex, if Donald Trump is currently still funding Reuters newswire services? You want to explain that for me? Here it is. At this exact moment, still currently funding Reuters news service. This is wire services for news stories from Reuters. 2/13/2025. $733,000. That's Donald Trump's administration funding Reuters, which is still ongoing. How does that make sense? How does he ban Reuters for being a propaganda for the deep state when they're using them right now, Alex? How does that make sense? Well, here's the clip to going to the second part he was trying to claim. And here, where was I was going to show you? Oh, right here, the link to this. I'll include this for you so you can actually look to the actual document for yourself. It's not just screenshots. Here it is. Reuters News and Media. Potential end date, 2027. As of right now, they've given him $733,000 since Trump took over. That's in February, by the way. So a full month. And they are continuing providing wire services. Now, I don't find that to be a bombshell. I know Reuters is propaganda like the rest of them are, but they're using news services because that's what governments do. The idea that you're arguing it's anything more than that would need to be proven, right? Not when you're going against the Democrats or going against the Republicans. It becomes whatever you say it is because they're the bad guy. So again, if he's saying that they've banned them, then it doesn't add up, seeing as how they're still funding it. But here's the next one. He's saying that the Thomas Reuters dynamic over here was at least his argument for why that we shouldn't trust the incorrect claim he was saying Reuters was putting forward, even though they weren't. But let me play that for you because that's also a deception. I'll just play some of this, which is important. But started in 2018. Active social engineering defense, large-scale social deception. Okay, so wouldn't the very first thing you do, and by the way, so you can see it, that's the same amount, as well as the minus 62, you can just see them both right there. 162,000, and there's the 9.147. There it is. Okay, same contract. Well, look at that. So in 2018, right, smack dab in the middle of Donald Trump's administration, he paid $1 million for active social engineering defense and large-scale social deception. Is Ian Miles Chong and the rest going to call that out? Or are we going to pretend like it only matters now? Or 2019, another $1 million. 2019, another 120,000. 2020, 1.3 million. Again in 2020, 322,000. Again in 2020, 488,000. So are we going to ignore the COVID-19 overlap in all this? That maybe they were building up for some social large-scale deception program? Right. Now, the point is to argue when we don't know, right? The idea that the point is the Department of Defense, and watch the whole show, by the way, the links included, have been giving that contract to them for a while, and it went through Trump's administration. And if they were going to use large-scale deceptions, well, let's consider whether that was done through those administrations for what we know they build. But other than that, it's all hypothetical. We don't know. So if the claim today that we know that's what this is just an abstract, it's an illusion. They're trying to get you jumping at Democrat shadows because whatever they don't want you looking at right now. That's my opinion. But I think it should matter that people like this are so egregiously deceiving while claiming to be honest. Here's another example. Now, what's funny about this is he grabbed the parody account for Charlie Kirk, but Charlie Kirk literally did tweet that. It's right here. He says, there are those that parrot propaganda, those that believe propaganda, and those that know a propagandist when they see one. And he's highlighting what Charlie Kirk did say, which is right here. Doge has removed 9.9 million scammers from Social Security systems so far. Is this what you voted for? And this is just a thing going around. And here's even screenshotting Grok right there going, that's actually not true. And you can read it right here. And you read the plenty of different source material, breaking it down, showing you that it is in fact a deception. And it says, no, the claim that Doge has removed 9.9 million scammers from social media system is not accurate. the Doge, led by Musk, has been involved in updating Social Security records, specifically marking approximately 9.9 million Social Security number holders listed as age 120 or older as deceased. This is part of the cleanup, meaning that people have died, they moved them on. They're deceiving you with different things. Now, are there scammers? Yes. But okay, if that's the case, and we're finding people who are doing so, why isn't anybody being arrested for that? I think we all know the answer to this. But the point is, you could continue reading, and hopefully you'll actually check the source material and not blindly trust Grok. The reality is that all of these people share it because that's a talking point that's going around. Here's Wall Street Mav. Just a reminder, Doge has removed 9.9 million scammers. Well, if they died and they're still there, they're not scammers. Now, certainly that could be abused, but yes, we've shown you how long that's been abused. And also on top of that, that the Social Security system was the origin point for the tracking identification system that's being implemented today. That's where it started. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just provable fact. Here is another 200,000 follower account saying Doge has removed 11 million scammers. It's a number shift, right? Number shift around. This one up. Now it's 11 million because I guess somebody that she follows said that and no one checks facts anymore. Holy smokes. Now, what's important around this, 7Cs points out, I'm going to look more into this. I actually asked him if he wanted to write something about this for TLAV. Look at that. How funny. This platform is so manipulative. For the podcast, I'm definitely following him, but it just doesn't show that. Oh, now it does. Gotta love this manipulative platform. So the point is, what is MN2S? He says there's a talent agency that lets you book everyone from pop stars to politicians, and nobody's talking about it. Connecting top talent with global opportunities. Interesting. Hold on. Did I go too far? There it is. He says there is a talent agency that lets you book everyone from pop stars to politicians. And guess who's a part of it? Peter Thiel and Alex Jones. Now, maybe that means nothing to you. Personally, I think there's more to this than you realize. And we're being played. Now, I'll reiterate this. Stop listening to what they're saying. Start focusing on what they're doing. Even those who mean their words can often be stopped or delayed for a multitude of reasons. What is the outcome? And do you support that outcome? It's pretty simple. Politicians are not your friends. And this person says, no, but they said Trump stopped talking to Netanyahu. He's mad at him, but he's really going to stop giving them money for real this time because several people on this app reported that for real. It's just making a joke out of it, but that's what we get, right? Like the absolute certainty of something that you can prove is wrong. Now, there's some important stuff to go over that are some pretty alarming contradictions here. Now, I wanted to start with this. It may feel the start to be a little bit, you'll see why this connects. And I'll tell you right now, but I'm going to play this clip about 1 minute and 40 seconds of what is he again? The Israeli spokesman, David Mencer. And just the content's important. I mean, you're going to obviously see why this is frustrating. But the point is that he refuses to actually answer the question and just pivots back to the overarching talking point that doesn't even remotely address the question that's asked. And at the beginning, that was just ignored because people were afraid to be called racist. Sky News has always been kind of, in some cases, pushing back, but now it seems everybody is being allowed to do so. But what I want you to compare is the way that he responds to the question. And instead of answering the very easy question that, and acknowledging that what he says is, verifiably true, and he knows that, he instead makes it about how you're supporting Hamas by saying it or whatever. And consider that with what we go and do next in regard to Kristi Noem and the way that she responds around the immigration conversation. I don't think it's coincidence, the commonality, the common thread between how the way that they're conducting propaganda. Now, I just mean the U.S. government and Israel. In a very, very clear way, the U.S. government has now basically shifted into doing the same style of propaganda. And that's what I mean about the nuance versus just the outright lie. And I don't know why. It seems to be clumsy and obvious, but maybe I'm the only, maybe it's tricking people. I don't know. But consider this as before we go to the next point.
It does seem that there's a pattern developing. America has done this deal without Israel. They've done a deal with the Houthis, no Israel. They're talking to Iran, no Israel. Isn't this all humiliating for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, that's again the story which Hamas want you to share, but this war will end when the hostages come home and Hamas are gone. Simple.
And even if we don't get to it, by the way, that's always a lie. Because right now, Netanyahu and the rest are saying that even if we get the hostages, the war will not end because Hamas has to be defeated. We've been telling you that since day one because they said that. And he still lies about that. All the screamers online still lie about that. John Fetterman still lies about that every day. But the point, obviously, now is that he asked he just point blank, he said that you're not involved, right? Isn't that embarrassing? Well, the obvious, yes, they're not involved. No one can deny that, but he refuses to engage with it.
For Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, that's again the story which Hamas want you to share, but this war will end when the hostages come home and Hamas are gone. Simple as that. Not a minute before.
I'm merely stating facts and asking you questions. You can't.
No, they're not facts. They're opinions. They're opinions. We won't rest until they're your opinions, Mark. And Mark, you've been wrong about this war in every single moment. And we've had this discussion over the last 19 months. You've been wrong at every single point. You want to capitulate. You want Israel to capitulate to Hamas, and we won't. We won't do it because we're a democracy. I'm happy to be asked questions.
I appreciate that. Completely appreciate that.
Ask me a decent question, I'll answer it.
Well, please do. Tell me where this is wrong. Did the Americans have any involvement in the release of this? The Israelis have any involvement in the release of this hostage? Have the Israelis had any involvement in the deal with the Houthis that the Americans have done? Are the Israelis talking to Iran at the moment? That's were my questions. Where am I wrong on that? Please tell me, because it'll be interesting to know.
We are closer than ever with our American allies.
That's it right there.
What you're sharing is a view which Israel's enemies would like to share it to the outside world.
See, these are line towers, guys. This is Sky News, and they're just like, he says, this guy is like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't, like, you could make up a better narrative that would sound more honest than that. It's insane to me that that's what we get. And I'm going to show you something that is, look, I'm going to be clear right now, not even remotely unique to this administration or one side of the paradigm, but is just crazy on the surface right now. But we've seen it in the past. You know, it's what we laugh about when they're in Congress and they just they refuse to answer the question and just repeat the same thing. It's getting really, it's more important to me now because the topic is about something that immediately affects every American, no matter your view. My point is, this is what we're getting, and I think the overlap is very clear.
It's not just wrong, it's morally backwards. Let's not confuse the arsonist with the firefighter. We're fighting to defeat Hamas in this war.
You realize, again, the thing was, were you involved in these processes? That is his response. Because you see, he knows that the answering the question will make you look bad. So then you attack him for asking the question, or rather just stating those facts as you're disreceiving or misrepresenting. He's not. It's basic information. So keep that in mind. And whether we get to it today or not, we're going to talk about eventually the point about whether they're actually splitting with Netanyahu. I think it's completely a facade. But here is Cristian. Aaron Melnick says, this is a masterclass in bad faith testimony. Now, again, don't mishear me on this. I've seen left and right do this forever. To me right now, it's important because, one, I think she's bad at this. I think, quite frankly, a lot of the people that have been picked in his administration are because they're blind order followers, but not which to me suggests they're not as bright as others. I think you can plainly see that, quite frankly. But the way that they do it is just, it's this smug, like blithe, kind of like righteous indignation. So again, it's not unique to this administration or this partisanship, but what's crazy is how the obviousness of it, let's say, and how it relates to constitutional rights, right? So if you had these kind of things in the past about, which I'm sure there's some overlap, about things that were that consequential, I think it would have had more impact. Today, I just think this stands out like a sore thumb. It says she literally refuses to answer a question for 3 minutes straight and then claims without any credibility that she somehow hasn't ever previously seen a photo that Trump posted and has no knowledge of it. That's like the leading law enforcement entity. The poster, the image that he says they used and was the claim for why they sent him there. Like, what I think is it shows their lack of foresight or just ignorance. that when they do this, or when they go in front of the Supreme Court, for example, and say something that contradicts what their lawyers said, you guys, that will end up hurting them. That shows you that they either think they have impunity, or they're just not smart enough to see that they're contradicting themselves, or they can't control everybody's words. I don't know. But that's the kind of stuff we get right here. This will come back to bite them.
Madam Secretary, you have an important job. I think you have one of the most important jobs in the cabinet. Thank you for doing it. I want you to have credibility and be taken seriously as you do the job. And so I want to put to rest this question about Mr. Garcia in this photo that the president posted on April 21. Madam Secretary, you agree that the letters MS and the number 13 in Times Roman numeral font, that they are doctored on this photo, right?
Congressman Abrego Garcia.
No, I'm just asking about this photo.
It wasn't based off of tattoos. It was based off an entire case.
And I'll accept.
It was, though. 100%. We've gone over it. I won't jump in now, but it was.
I'll accept that
case against him.
For the purpose of this question. You agree, though, that this is doctored. Is that right?
The same protocols that are
Madam
applied
Secretary,
to every
I want you to have
with
credibility,
law
and
enforcement.
I want you to be taken seriously. Is this doctored or is it not
Sir,
doctored?
I am taken quite seriously.
Is it
because
doctored
I
or
approach my
not
job
doctored?
With the importance that the president has given me to do
I understand.
my job.
Is it doctored?
No, you clearly take yourself very seriously. But the question, I don't think, personally, I find it hard to take you seriously. I find it hard to take a lot of people seriously, left and right in the government, because you all seem really, really out of, I mean, I was going to say the circle, but like, these are, I think my opinion is always is these people are the ones that are being played by the power structure while being given the allowance to think that they're in the know. That's how I see it. Frankly, this is embarrassing. The choosing to not answer, like, think about why you wouldn't answer that. This is my thing. This is not about some nuance about some foreign policy. This is a fundamentally obvious point. Yes, we all know that's doctored. And now the argument is not about whether it is or not. It's about whether Trump believes that, which he obviously did. And I'll play it for you next. But the sad thing is, because they're so desperate to just, toe the line, that she won't even look at it. She won't even respond to it. And she eventually, when forced, won't even say that she knows what it is. And instead keeps going back to how we used everything we could. And the point is, she lied about that. It's been proven in court, in the very things they present. They used the point system, and it was based on, I think, 2 points for the bull's hat and 2 for the tattoos, which then amount to 4, which was enough to get him deported. That's on the record. Everything else was circumstantial hearsay that even the judges have admitted. We've talked about this endlessly. 2 deportation courts where they used hearsay from a cop who's now was fired right afterward for corruption, who pointed to an anonymous source who claimed he was MS-13. And they said, well, we're going to take the cop at face value for the deportation case, put it down in the notes. Went the second thing did the same. None of those were proving he was part of it. None of them were criminal cases. None of them were actually saying this means he's MS-13. And then when it actually went to something that would mean something, nothing happened. He got dismissed. Then Trump's administration, 2019, allowed him to stay under withholding of removal because of political persecution from El Salvador. All this time forward, the same Trump administration, or rather Trump and his new administration, comes back and says, now something's different, even though it's not, and points to those same 2 documents that cite what the cop said. That's all it means. No one's ever found out who the anonymous source is. The cop was fired for corruption. And judges to this day are saying this is based on the bull's hat and the tattoos and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. No one has proven these things. And to this day, they say that proves it. And then they also just add on human trafficking and wife beating, neither of which have actually been confirmed. Yes, there's domestic abuse calls. The wife says nothing happened. Of course, she could be lying. I don't know. Neither does Kristi Noem. But they're so desperate to make a case, they're willing to lean into circumstantial things that don't even have anything to do with the claim that they're making. The human trafficking claim was he got arrested, he got pulled over with people in a car. I just went over this. They suspected he might have been doing something wrong. Why? Because of the same notation about MS-13 they had in their files. But they themselves released him because there's nothing there. It was something notated. They looked into it. They had nothing to charge him with. They gave him a ticket and he went home. And to this day, she says human trafficking. You can't actually be this dishonest and this verifiably wrong and think that you can win. The point is that they need the blind followers like the people we're talking about today. Otherwise, they have nothing. Stop falling for it.
I am taking quite seriously enforcement.
And I want you to be taken seriously. Is this doctored or is it not
Sir,
doctored?
I am taking quite seriously
Is
because
it doctored
I
or not
with
doctored?
the importance that the president has given me to do
I understand.
my job.
Is it doctored or
One
not
thing
doctored?
that's important to remember is that every single time a case is built,
Madam
these
Secretary, I have a
individuals
7-year-old,
have
a
the same
6-year-old, and a
protocols.
3-year-old. I have a bullshit detector. I'm just asking you, is this doctored or not doctored?
Sir, the protocols in the case built against
Can you
Diego
answer the
Garcia
question?
were exactly the same.
Madam
I
Secretary,
don't have
you're-
any knowledge as to that photo you're pointing to.
Okay.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So she clearly felt like she had to answer right there. You don't know. See, you know, that was, see, if I were her, I would have never stopped saying that because I've seen this so many times. And yeah, it makes you look really bad, but you could always argue that you just, like they do, we know what the Democrats are doing. He's trying to trick me into this. He's going to use that out of context. Maybe. They're all politically motivated, all of them. But what's interesting is that she could have just kept going. I just keep this with protocol, whatever she was doing. Instead, for whatever reason, she decided to go, well, I've never seen that before, whatever, you know, I'll play it again, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Seeing as how this is the thing that Trump posted, which are we really going to pretend that she doesn't see that? I think I can literally prove to you that she shared it. But what's funny is that she is the person leading this case. And he's telling you that was the core reason that we deported him, and you don't know about that? You're either lying or that's alarming how completely out of the loop of your job you are. So that's embarrassing.
Answer the
Garcia
question.
were exactly the same.
Madam Secretary,
I don't have
you're-
any knowledge as to that photo you're pointing to.
Okay.
Wow.
Can you
I
take
don't,
her,
sir.
Can you show her
I-
the photo? Walk her the photo down there. No, that one.
Now
Please take a look at this.
This gets wild, like childish, to where she refuses to look at it.
Photo. It was tweeted by the president on April 21. It's been hanging out there for about a month.
So what is your point?
My question is the numbers and the letter MS-13. Could you look at the photo, please? It's right in front of
Are
you.
you saying Abrego Garcia is not a wife beater?
No, ma'am.
Not a wife beater? I mean, like even this is my point, guys. In a year, this is not a smart person. That is a reflexive answer that goes into the worst possible direction. The subjective claim that has nothing to do with whether or not, like, if let's just say he's the worst wife beater in the world, that has no bearing on whether or not he can be deported based on the claim that he's a MS-13 gang member. It's insane. Like, I would have laughed out loud if I was in that room. Like, really, you say that? That's crazy. Realize that even those things, though, are based on circumstantial evidence, and none of that has any bearing on the actual case at hand. And that's what they have to do, since there's nothing to back up what they've been saying.
That he's not a criminal.
Ma'am,
he's not a human trafficker. And
ma'am,
he's not a member of MS.
You vouched for Mr.
She said human trafficking again, by the way. Of all the claims, no, they haven't even tried to present evidence to that in any court. And she still has the nerve to say that right now. So of all of them, Pam Bondi, they've repeated ad nauseum. I mean, like if there was any honesty in this world, that somebody would hold them for libel, for slander. That's an insane thing to say about somebody with nothing to back it up. They don't care.
Garcia, when
You're
your
vouching
team
for
said,
a man.
ma'am,
So what is your point?
my question is the numbers and the letter MS-13. Could you look at the photo, please? It's right in front of
Are
you.
you saying Abrego Garcia is not a wife beater?
No, ma'am.
That he's not a criminal.
Ma'am,
He's not a human trafficker. And
ma'am,
he's not a member of MS.
You vouched for Mr. Garcia when
You're
your team
vouching for
said,
a man
ma'am, you
that
vouched
is a
for him when
known
you said he was
violent
mistakenly deported.
Sir.
I didn't vouch for him.
I did not say
In that
He
photo.
should have been deported. Absolutely.
It's so
There was
telling
never a
that you
mistake
won't look at the
deport him,
photo.
And we will not be bringing
Was
him back
it
to this
doctored or
country.
not?
In staying here, if
Can you
he
look
comes
to
back
your
the
right
country, he
at
would
the
be
photo in
deported
front
right
of you?
away.
Madam Secretary, can you look to the right at the photo in front of you?
I have seen this
Okay.
photo as you held it behind your head.
Thank you.
Ooh,
And
she's so obviously lying, in my opinion. I've seen the photo when it was behind you a second ago. Oops. That was, see, she's flustered. That's my opinion. But I mean, think about what she's saying right there and everything. Like
to the right at the photo. Look to your right.
Will not be bringing
Was
him back
it
to
doc?
this
You said he was
violent
mistakenly deported.
Sir.
I didn't vouch for him.
I did not say
In that
He
photo.
should have been deported.
I did not say, like, okay, so you have to understand, from her position to argue that her administration or her, as the leader of the law enforcement direction, that she is not aware that they argued that he was deported mistakenly, because he was. That was their argument, because it was not again, I'll give you their nuanced argument that she clearly can't even wrap her mind around, which is that he should have been deported, but El Salvador was the wrong place. That's what their actual argument is, because the Supreme Court had already ruled that he wasn't allowed to be sent to El Salvador. In any context, anybody being deported is supposed to be given due process. That is the Constitution. Yes, it applies to illegal immigrants, regardless of how uninformed you are. The point, though, is that they could have sent him anywhere else and given him due process, and that would have been legal. They didn't, though. They sent him to the one place where the Supreme Court said they weren't allowed to. And so they said that was an error. That was an administrative error. And they filed that. Her administration, her position filed that. And she sits here and says that she didn't do that. So either she has no clue, either she is a puppet, and somebody else is running her position, which wouldn't surprise me, or she's just really bad at lying.
Team said, ma'am, you vouched for him when you said he was mistakenly deported.
Sir,
I didn't vouch for him.
I did not say
in that
he
photo.
Should have been deported.
Wow.
Absolutely.
It's so
There was
telling
never
that
a
you
mistake
won't look at the
deporting,
photo.
and we will not be bringing.
Was
him back
it
to
doctored
this
or not?
And that's despite the Supreme Court ruling that they have to, and they just don't care.
Here,
Can you look to your right at the photo in front of you? Madam Secretary, can you look to the right at the photo in front of you?
I have seen this
Okay.
photo as you held it behind your head.
Thank you.
Wow.
And the letters MS and the numbers 13, are those
Is
doctored
this your
or
entire
not?
testimony today is on a doctored photo. You don't want to talk about the facts.
Okay,
The
so
importance of our national security.
You
She just admitted it was doctored by accident.
acknowledge it was
Do
doctored.
to make sure that the United States is protected.
Madam Secretary,
from
this is not a
violent
hard question.
criminals?
Are those doctored or not?
Sir,
Is that actually on his hand or not?
I mean, you have to realize that for her to go, you just want to make this country unsafe and hurry the border, like maybe, probably, but that has no bearing on what's going on right now. You know, she's like asking the basic question of, is this what's actually there? Because she knows that's going to make Trump look bad. She'll probably get yelled at if she makes him look bad. You know, whatever it is, that you're so willing to just go out, you're attacking him for things that aren't even relevant, because they know that people that will support her no matter what will go after whatever they can to go Democrat bad. And that's why he's doing all this, despite, and maybe doesn't change the fact that she's also wrong and that she refuses to highlight that was a false impression that was used to argue that they sent him for the right reasons. And that even Trump still thinks that, or at least he did before that very embarrassing interview.
This is unbelievable to me that you're focused.
It's unbelievable to me that you can't look at the photo and tell the American people.
I looked at the photo, but I don't have any knowledge as to this photo.
Okay, so it's been hanging out there for 4 weeks. You are one of the chief law enforcement officials in the country. What have you done to investigate whether the president misrepresented the reason that person has been detained?
Sir,
have you done anything to try and figure out whether that was doctored or not?
The mission of the Department of Homeland Security is to secure our nation and to make sure that we're out there going after those that are the worst of the worst, the criminals, the bad actors. Abrego Garcia.
So the answer is you've done nothing to correct the president.
Of MS-13.
Right. So what you did is go after people that you can't prove are criminals. Meanwhile, there are plenty of criminals that you're not arresting, like the Epstein list, like the Clintons and the Faucis and the Gates and all that. Or, you know, how about all the other things you keep telling us? All the different people that keep breaking the law, the Doge is exposing. No, but you're just going after children and people in colleges that scream about Israel and people you manufacture lies about. For all I know, he's a terrible person. It doesn't change the fact that they have not presented actual tangible evidence that proves that he's anything they're claiming. Or how about Trump waving his hand and saying all these illegal aliens in restaurants and farms that we like are allowed to keep doing that? Illegal aliens, many of which are probably also criminals based on their own logic. But that's okay, though. Imagine being in her position and being so smug and so absolute when you can quite literally prove that she is walking a knife's edge here.
A wife beater and a human trafficker that should never have been in this country to begin with.
So she ends with the two things you can prove for sure, or rather, the two things that are based on nothing but hearsay. Well, I guess that's all of it, really. I mean, the thing is that you have the possibility in the background of whether or not they were able to prove that he was a gang member, right? Maybe that's the case, like anybody. Maybe I'm a gang member. You don't know. My point is that what they were able to put forward has never actually proven that, and they're lying about it. On the human trafficking part of it, that's nothing. That's built on one possible statement made from a cop looking at the same floated MS-13, the deportation case notation that wasn't ever actually a charge, and then using that to go, maybe there's more happening here, and then letting him go because there wasn't. And that's it to this very day. And they've said they keep screaming human trafficking. I just think that's just, you got to be such a disgusting person to be so absolutely, to be leaning in so aggressively on things that you must know are not actually provable, or you're a very dangerous. Well, I mean, like, look, dangerous in the sense that you could be lying to people, but more so dangerous if you don't even know that you're being used. As the Homeland Security Secretary, these people are alarming. I think we're watching a time where more people are being used than we realize. And I said, this is the sad reality of partisan politics in the United States. They have turned this country into a laughingstock. And if you're pretending right now that this is unique to one side or the other, you're part of that embarrassment. Of course, gets so little engagement because nobody likes that. But here is Trump, I guess, pushing back on this idea. And it's just still to this day, people act like this is not obvious.
Court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
Supreme Court says what the law
Hardly.
is.
Listen,
Hardly.
I was elected to take care of a problem. It was a unforced error that was made by a very incompetent man, a man that turned out to be incompetent.
Now, one thing you want to note that he has never, I don't think he's ever actually stated in one sentence that Biden manufactured an illegal invasion of our country using illegal aliens. That is the kind of like the fuzzy argument they're making without really textualizing it, because they have to make that argument. Without that argument, everything falls on its face. But even if you actually believe that Biden was initiating an invasion of illegal immigrants to win elections, I guess, or whatever you want to argue, even though that's not what happened, despite the claim of 20 million legal immigrants, and that's not even true. It's funny how often these things just never connect. But what's crazy is that you're basically arguing that that's an illegal invasion, so you can argue that through the Alien Enemies Act, that these people are an organized state actor from Venezuela. But wait a minute, you just said Biden was the one that was doing it, but you're now Venezuela's the actor. It on its face is completely incongruent. To use the Alien Enemies Act, you have to argue that it's a state actor and that it's an organized military force. That's not my opinion. That's what it states. So that's why they turned him into a terrorist organization right before this, and that's why they declared the state of emergency. Every move they did was in order to try to manufacture the legal justification for what they were already planning to do for El Salvador and for Israel, in my clear opinion. And they're getting caught. All right. So at this point, if it is a state actor, then Biden didn't do it. Or you can argue Biden worked with Venezuela. If that's the case, then you somehow need to prove to me that these people are acting in unison as a state invasion, because that's what it would require. And on top of that, if you are going to argue that because of this and because they said these are terrorists, that where they don't need to give them due process based on some argument that the argument they're putting forward is if you have Russia invades the country, you wouldn't argue that you would be giving the Russian invaders due process. Even though I would argue that is what we would argue from a state of we are better, we're changing the world, the play we put on, right? That we're spreading democracy and freedom and our liberal values, in a sense of liberty, rather, not liberal. But the point is, it would still make sense to me that we would give people their rights and not just throw them in a dungeon because we think they're on the other side of a line, right? But we know that's not how most people think, at least what the narrative shows you. My point, though, is that if it's not Russia and it's a bunch of scattering different people, or even if it is, you would still have to prove that it was part of the Russian army, right? So as these people come through the country and you're claiming they're part of an organized force, you still have to prove that. That would be due process. Right. So even the argument that an invading force doesn't get that, you still have to verify that they are an invading force. And you can't do that, seeing as how it's all just one muddled group of immigration. It is so transparent what's happening today. I'm just so infuriated that we have to keep going through this because I do see people honestly falling for it.
You always said was wonderful, great genius, right? And now you find out all of the media, it was pretty close.
Right up there.
I campaigned on that issue quickly. Wait a minute. Said you couldn't do it, and we're doing it.
I'm trying to jump ahead to the part.
You'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
They just look down, and what do you know? He happened to have it on his knuckles, and now we proved it. Like, are you really that simple? I mean, come on, guys. Like, it's, when you think about the way they look down, and he had it on his fingers. He didn't, but I'm increasingly finding it hard to believe he was played, tricked, used. I mean, I just don't believe he would do that. I don't think he has it in him to make himself look that stupid on purpose. That's my opinion.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop.
So let me that was Photoshop, Terry. You can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture. We'll
and you think it was Photoshop? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted.
Not interpreted. That's the point. There's no way you misunderstand that. He's pushing back on that they were interpreted to mean that. He says, no, not interpreted. MS-13. So anybody out there trying to tell you didn't think that is either lying to you for partisan reasons or is, I guess, I don't want to say necessarily stupid, but the kind of person that will listen to what the DC Dranos of the world say and without checking for themselves. That's what it is.
People no longer believe the news because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador,
And here's the problem, though. Am I saying that there's not fake news, that we can trust the liberal or Fox News media? No, obviously not. That's my point from the beginning. They have to couch you in one of the two false narratives. Otherwise, they just ignore you. And the point is that very clearly, most people, I think, are beginning to go, look, they're all lying to you. That's what's happening. And you get the screaming partisan people at the top who frame it as if, you know, the Democrats always say X, Y, and Z, and all they're doing is pointing at the idiots in Congress. Is that what every Democrat in the conversation thinks? Usually not. But they keep the cycle going by only framing it as that's all that matters, when that's the minority of even people who vote today, if you still think that makes a difference. So here's another clip. He says, Aaron says, will you give Abrego Garcia, he's quoting it, the due process Supreme Court has required? Here's what Noam has to say. This will frustrate you.
Recognize Mr. Magaziner for 5 minutes.
Madam Secretary, on April 24th, a woman in Louisiana.
That's the wrong one. This one.
Stop filibustering. By gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give?
Sorry about the crackling. I can't fix that.
Him.
Abrego Garcia is
Wilkinson has required you to give him.
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately.
So
and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately.
And see, this is the whole problem, is that this is people that are just choosing a side and acting like if she just repeats the narrative and hopes that everyone supports her, that somehow will win the day. Maybe it will. I certainly hope not, as that seems to be like the end of everything we are. But recognize that the Supreme Court has ruled that they're wrong. They admitted there was an error. They said that facilitate point. And remember, if you follow us when we were talking about that, remember, the first ruling was facilitate and effectuate. And they lost their minds about somehow claiming effectuate meant they were controlling executive power. And it was just, it was an insane argument. And so they said, fine. Since the word facilitate, we all know what it means. And clearly they did. Clearly they used that. And they were not pretending like that's not what it means. And they've come back and said, no, that's a verb. It means you have to, which I think he mentions here. They're just pretending, guys. They're playing a game. So they have ruled that they have to facilitate his return. So even that, though, if they pretend like, well, fine, then we wait for them to do something and we're here if you need us, that's still acknowledging that you're accepting the ruling that needs to be corrected, whether it's them or you. And what she's arguing shows you that she either doesn't know that or she's just lying. And yet every single time in this conversation, so you're standing bald-faced against the Supreme Court ruling, 6 conservative judges. And many other Trump appointees at lower courts that have ruled in the same way. Now, we'll probably end on the last point about the recent judge Trump appointed that ruled in favor, sort of using the Alien Enemy Act, but as always, argued that even if they do, they still have to use due process or give them their required due process. But it won't be applied that way. They take the ruling and they say what they want it to mean, and all the blind followers scream that that's all it means. And that, sadly, seems to trickle down to people that don't know any better.
Why is your opinion better
We had
and
two
have more authority than the Supreme Court.
investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court.
She's going right back to 2019. That's not the point. And I don't even think she doesn't understand. I don't think she knows that. That all of that has been taken into consideration by the Supreme Court. Here's the ruling. That's the end of the story. Now, you can disagree with that, but the idea they can just disregard what they say is insane. And that's the point this has risen to. All she does is point back to the things that, one, we all know they're misrepresenting, and two, that the Supreme Court has already taken into effect.
That all said he was MS-13
No,
and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This
No.
is investigators and law
That is
enforcement
you
officers
making that
in the case they built
determination.
against him. If you don't
The
trust our law
court
enforcement
has
officers-
considered all.
So just you can't hear what she's trying to scream in the background. Well, if you don't trust our law enforcement officers, then you should do something. It's an invalid argument. It's not about whether he agrees with the original arguments or what they put forward or knows that you're misrepresenting all of it. It's the Supreme Court has looked at all of it and they've ruled that you need to bring him back. That's it. That's why that she is. And I mean, you can call it filibustering, even though it's not technically what this would apply. But she's just trying to talk around the conversation and never actually engage with the facts. It's all emotional sidestep, distraction, division.
That the judge has considered making that determination.
Against him. If you don't
the
trust our law
court
enforcement
has
officers
considered all that.
and
The judge has
investigators,
considered all that,
then
Madam
who do you
Secretary.
trust if you
And
don't
if you would be
trust judges?
quiet, because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order. But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process?
So obviously that's a very simple question, but we see this all the time. You know that you can't answer that because you haven't taken any steps. They're playing this game with the court and acting like we don't understand. What do you mean? I thought facilitate meant something else, even though the whole world knows the back and forth and knows that the argument is that that's not the the Supreme Court has made it clear. We expect results from you, and they just keep dragging it out and ignoring it or suspending or elongating the process. So her response is about trying to distract from that, knowing that she doesn't have an answer, or rather knowing that the answer will make her look, will show that they're breaking the law.
Abrego Garcia is in his home country.
What steps have you taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him. I'm advocating for a court order.
And see, there you go. He took the bait, right? She accused him of something. Well, if you're going to do this, there's nothing. You took the bait. The question, ask the question, answer the question. Okay? At least that was crafty, to distract from the point, but this is emotional misdirection.
Order, Madam Secretary. The court order says that you must take steps to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents.
Wow.
To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process.
A terrorist like this. Now you're calling him a terrorist, which they've been doing, right? But the only reason you would say that is because they declared that gang a terrorist group, and they've yet to prove he's actually part of the gang. It is absolutely shocking where we are right now. At the highest levels of power, either are completely co-opted by something destroying this country or are on their agenda of their own, and they literally couldn't care less about this country. Either way, guys, the core point is that this is hurting this country in such staggeringly obvious ways. And how dare I? Well, I can't imagine what it'd be like to be one of your constituents. Look, it doesn't matter if you agree with everything she thinks or not. Due process applies whether or not you have a side. That's the simple fact. And if anybody out there is trying to tell you otherwise, maybe you should reflect on how smart they are, because they're wrong. And it's one of the easiest things to prove in this conversation. Now, there's a couple of examples here. Let's see if I want to play this one. Yeah, we'll play this one too. And then I think we're going to end with this clip and we'll get to the rest in another show. So he says, the Trump admin's position around all these cases is that everything a DHS officer says is 100% the truth and everything an immigrant says is 100% a lie. And they maintain that position when evidence, keeps piling up, confirming that what the DHS said was in fact not true. This goes back well before the current administration. Biden's and before that to Trump and before that even. The Intercept wrote one, I think, an article from 2019 that talks about how the DHS was just manufacturing excuses that you could prove were lies. Nothing new. In this case, it's just on a much, much more important, larger scale. But we've talked about all this. We've talked about the American citizens that were seconds away from being sent to El Salvador if they hadn't have been stopped by the Supreme Court, and in that process were able to convince and prove somebody that they were an American citizen. That's not even getting into the children he discusses that are in fact American citizens. And the evidence now proves that in a court of law was shown that the family was trying to keep their kids here, that the mother tried to call the father and they took the phone out of her hand and deported her under the claim that she wanted her kids with her. They lied about it. You could prove it in court. And yet people like Noam and the rest will always maintain, Rubio and the rest, that, hey, we're not going to take the children away from their parents. Think about how grotesque that is. Again, they know that they're lying and they're appeasing, they're tapping into your compassion in order to trick you into allowing them to do this to this person. I mean, it is the worst of the worst.
Along with her 7-year-old.
Now I'll recognize Mr. Magaziner for 5 minutes.
Madam Secretary, on April 24th, a woman in Louisiana was deported along with her 7-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son, both of whom were U.S. citizens. The 4-year-old son had stage 4 cancer. Now, you just stated under oath that the mother consented to having her U.S. citizen children removed. But I have spoken with the attorney for that U.S. citizen child with stage 4 cancer. She has also made numerous statements to the press in which she stated unequivocally that at no time did the mother consent to her U.S. citizen children being removed. What evidence do you have to support your claim that she did consent?
Now, just in case it's not clear, like I said, on the record in the court documents, it's been shown that the officers took the phone out of her hand when they wanted and the father says the same thing in regard to that he was waiting and trying to get the kids to stay, and the mother wanted that. And their argument ever since has been that she wanted the kids to stay because they thought that was a swaying argument. Now he's telling you, look, we've spoken to them after the fact, and they're confirming that. Here's what she says.
Congressman, we followed the same policies and procedures.
What evidence do you have?
And we
what
have
evidence do you have?
We have documentation
that what documentation do you have that mother consented?
We'll get that to you, sir. I don't have it with me.
Please do. I understand it's hard to keep them all straight because you've deported multiple U.S. citizen children, but I'm asking specifically about the 4-year-old with cancer who was deported on April 25th. For the record, that family was also not given access to legal counsel before they were deported, even though their lawyer was in the same building at the time. I'm holding in my hands here a document called ICE Directive 11064, Interests of Non-Citizen Parents and Legal Guardians of Minor Children. This is the policy for how ICE agents should handle situations like this. It states unequivocally that parents and legal guardians should have the ability to make alternative care arrangements for minor children prior to their arrest or detention, and that ICE must afford parents the opportunity to consult with legal counsel. So, did the ICE agents working on this case who deported this 4-year-old with cancer of their own volition fail to follow ICE policies, or were they directed to by your office or anyone else in DHS leadership?
Sir, this mother chose to keep her child with her.
You have not produced any evidence to say so, but I'm asking again, have you directed DHS officers to ignore this
It's
policy?
very different than the previous administration. The previous administration
That's all you got, right? We're better than Democrats, and that gets it. All the dumb people cheer. That's as easy as it is. The bottom line is that the policy is clear. It's right now current, and you can prove that's not what they did. And you can prove the evidence that's been produced to court by everybody other than their statement is that they lied. I mean, and do we really need to convince? I mean, the evidence is spectacularly clear. Every single one of these conversations, they are outright lying to you around people's lives. And so it's important to understand for like some people chatting about this, what we're talking about here is, so you have a father who's still here he's legally here. You have a mother who didn't have citizenship. You have the children who are born here, who are U.S. citizens, who wanted to stay with the father, who is legally here. So the only thing that happened was they refused to let that happen for, I guess, a few more metrics on their scale. That's the reality of it. So to argue that they should have been removed with their family, that the argument about if it was just the mother, that would make sense to me, because where else are they going to go? They're going to put them in, putting them in foster care is the last thing we should want. But they had a father who was still here in this country. That's the point. And they did not allow him to take them, even though they both wanted that, and they wouldn't let him call. They wouldn't let the lawyer speak to them. Guys, you can't miss how dishonest that is. That's every part of this whole conversation. It is dishonest. Now, I'm going to skip these, but the point is, Kristi Noem literally on the record says due process does not guarantee a hearing. Guys, I actually think she's this stupid. I don't think she even understands the fundamental topics we're discussing, or she's trying to confuse people. But I don't think that makes sense to me. If you don't understand by now that due process, the hearing is one part of it, by the way, but it's one of the most important to face your accusers, right? Redress of grievances, to be able to present your own evidence. That's exactly the point. To argue you don't guarantee a hearing means you don't understand the Constitution. As the Secretary of the Homeland Security, God, it's terrifying. And of course, this one was about the point she's making. This is an important point. I'll probably go over it the next show, which is that, look, same thing I keep saying. If we do know, if you are trying to ignorantly argue that people who are being accused of illegal aliens don't get rights, or even if you are here illegally, that you don't have due process, which you do, easy to look up, many Supreme Court rulings, the easiest way to understand that's wrong is to think about it for a second. If the government's able to come and say, you're an illegal alien, and send you to a foreign country without proving that, what's to stop them from sending me or you or your mother or your sister? Nothing. Now, maybe it's because they don't know any better. Maybe because you're brown and forgot your license. It doesn't change the fact that that's obviously why, for anybody's circumstance, they have to prove their claims. It's amazing that we got to a point to where the people arguing to be constitutionalists are the one arguing that this makes sense. Wild to me, right? But in this case, what she's pointing out is that, well, right now you can see that on Etsy, you can buy an ice jacket for $20. And apparently they're all wearing, she makes the point, they're wearing masks, they're not identifying themselves, they're not producing warrants, all of which are egregious violations of our rights, but nobody cares about that apparently. Simply pointing out, well, look, if you're not identifying yourself, you're not following procedure, anybody could put a mask on, an ice vest, and go pretend to do it. And I bet you that's happening. There's no accountability. And all she can do is push back and say, we followed every regulation. They've identified themselves every time, despite the I could pick you up 4 videos right now that proves they didn't. How about Ozturk? One of the most famous, where we can see them. The guy in the window is like, why aren't you identifying yourselves? Where's your warrant? None of it ever happened. And Kristi Noem has the gall to sit there and tell you, lie to your face, or that she doesn't even know she's wrong, again, which is terrifying, that they followed everyone and everyone's been given a warrant and everyone's been notified. She's wrong or lying. It's alarming. Now, we'll end with this. First judge approves Trump invoking Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelans. Now, this is interesting for 2 reasons. One, the main point is that they all agree that they have to give them due process. That's the one thing that they're not doing. The one thing to me has been the central argument from day one. I've never tried to argue that I know what this person is, because I don't think anybody really does, other than what we can prove, and that's not enough. That's all circumstantial and subjective and hearsay. The point is, had they been given due process, they would have been able to prove whatever they want to make the claim about, let the judge decide, and then take action. That's the only thing I've ever argued. The fact that they try to derail this into human trafficking and beating his wife, and he's not the father of the year, is all emotional and obvious, because they have nothing. And that guy is still in prison, right? Same with the barber, who is proven to be an innocent person with no criminal record here legally. He's in El Salvador. Same with a 18-year-old, caught with no tattoos, no criminal record, have the wrong skin color at the wrong time. That's the guy where they caught him and they said, that's the wrong guy. The leader says, take him anyway. He's in jail in El Salvador. You can look all these things up. These are very public cases. And the best you get is people arguing that you're supporting terrorism. You're destroying this country, and you probably don't even care. In this case, they all argue the same, but they say that you are able to remove people using the act. And I'll go through the nuance on why that's important, because I get the sense that this is, let me put it this way. Regardless of what you agree with, this is how the case, how this is supposed to evolve. What's funny to me is they're the ones acting like judicial coups, and then they get a ruling they sort of like, and they go, yeah, that's how it's supposed to go, and they lean into it. It shows you that it's they're the ones abusing the system, whether these are politically motivated judges or not. Let's not forget, many of them have been Trump appointed, and they still go with this radical activist narrative when it's somebody they don't like or a ruling they disagree with, as long as it's not a right-leaning judge. Let's not forget, 6 of them on the Supreme Court are conservatives, and they've roundly ruled against what they're saying. Now, it says a federal judge ruled Tuesday, that was yesterday, that President Trump can invoke Alien Enemies Act, despite, again, that many of them have already ruled they can't. So it's 1-4 at this point in regard to how many rulings. But it says, 1-3 actually, but it says to remove Trendy Iraq remembers that, but determined the administration has provided insufficient notice before carrying out the deportations. And it gets more than that. That's the due process point. U.S. District Judge Stephanie Haynes' ruling contrasts with several other federal rulings who have ruled Trump illegally invoked the wartime statute, which is so transparently clear. And when you go through this, you'll see that basically what they're ruling here is the discretion of what the government's claiming, not that they necessarily believe it. And I'll read you directly from what the ruling says. She's very clear. This does not mean this, does not mean that. And nonetheless, people are claiming it does. And I'll read it for you. The point is, I think what she's doing here is saying, look, the discretion will give them the power to claim these things, but if people want to prove them wrong, that needs to happen. She's not going to dictate the bottom line is, if you're going to claim this is an invading force, for example, it's not her place to dictate that truth. She'll rule based on the presented evidence. The argument is, if we want to go further and decide that he is violating this, then we have to prove, which I think was easy to do, that's not a military force. It's a scattering of individual immigrants they're claiming is an organized invasion. And so it's easy to prove, should somebody want to. But she goes on, and then on top of that, the idea that, well, the last rulings made it clear that they have to get due process. So she says that, and then says they're failing to give them the time required to do it. So everything's basically the same, other than ruling that they're allowed to keep using the act as long as these things are actually what's going on, which I think we can prove they're not, if that makes sense. Now it goes through and says, she says Trump is within his rights to deport, this is important, members of a foreign terrorist organization, a designation he has made for them. Not that she's saying that she agrees that's the case, and I'll read through it very specifically. Haynes, a Trump appointee, which I think is relevant, right? If it's relevant for them to say it on one side, it's relevant in the other. And emphasized her, quote, unflagging obligation is to apply the law as written. Having done its job, the court now leaves it to the political branches of the government and ultimately to the people who elect those individuals to decide whether the laws and those executing them continue to reflect their will. Interesting way to write that. Like, to me, I think we have to pretty clearly acknowledge that does not seem to be like glowing, like I support what's happening, but rather that she is siding with what the law states in a very objective way, which I actually agree with. So what she's saying is Congress, guys. And that's the point we're all making, is that right now it's not her job to dictate. Congress is supposed to have already dealt with this by now, and they're toothless. It's interesting. So you'll see more as we go through, but I really do think this is going to end up being, this is the right way to do this, I would argue. It says the new split comes as the American Civil Liberties Union, which has filed a wave of lawsuits across the country challenging Trump's use of the act, calls on the Supreme Court to immediately take up the issue and swiftly provide a nationwide resolution, which they probably will, which will mean that then they'll rule on top of this and make the case one way or the other, whether they're allowed to continue using this. Now it says which doesn't matter seemingly because they're ignoring the last one, but it says the 1798 law enables authorities to summarily deport migrants amid an invasion or predatory incursion, both quotes, by a foreign nation. That's very specific, none of which is actually happening in the context of what they're pointing at. I say that way for a reason. All 3 times the law was invoked previously were in times of war, which is required. But Trump has looked to use it against alleged Venezuelan gang members that they deemed a terrorist group right before they used this. It seems really clearly patched together. Now it says, Haynes said she wasn't resolving whether the president can use the law to remove gang members. One of several consequential legal questions the judge took care to avoid. But by focusing on Trump's power to use the act, the Enemy Aliens Act, against foreign terrorist organizations, her ruling put her at odds with several other judges who weighed on the matter. Now, you could argue that they ruled, which I agree with, from my perspective, that it's obvious this is not a terrorist organization in any metric. They're using that to make this all fit together. So you can argue those judges were ruling on their interpretation of that. which I would argue that's not the judge's purview. They should be arguing what, the evidence presented and what they can prove in the constitutional law. Even though I agree that they're lying to them, right? But so I get where this person's coming from, but you get what I'm saying is I think that this was like right down the middle of the law, but it will be used by them, which is probably what some of these other judges were thinking, like they already have, by saying they're siding with us. I mean, for crying out loud, Matt Miller said a 9-0 rule against them was them winning. So it means nothing. But I still think this goes the right direction. It says judges in 3 other jurisdictions have found Trump does not have the power to use the act to target gang members. See, even though that's what they keep calling, it's all about MS-13, Tren de Aragua. And by the way, they only declared one of them terrorist organizations, right? MS-13 was not the one that declared a terrorist organization. That's important. So she's saying they have no right to use it to remove gang members, which that's the whole premise. So in effect, she's calling them out too. And it says saying the law was not meant to be used outside of an invasion or incursion. Very important. U.S. District Judge Fernando Rodriguez Jr., a Trump appointee in Texas, said the rarely used law can only be invoked when an organized armed force is entering the United States. He's right. He wrote that Trump's invocation of the act, quote, exceeds the scope of the statute and as a result is unlawful. A Trump appointee in Texas, which they all happen to ignore while calling out the judicial coup, and any Democrat speaks up, of course, because they're all dishonest. The proclamation makes no reference to and in no manner suggests that a threat exists of an organized armed group of individuals entering the United States at the direction of Venezuela to conquer the country or assume control over a portion of the nation, all of which is required to meet the requirements for using this act. That's the point. It says, thus, the proclamation's language cannot be read as describing conduct that falls within the meaning of invasion for purposes of this act. He wrote that in the earlier decision this month. It goes on to say, under those other courts' rulings, the act cannot be used against migrants detained in Colorado and parts of New York and Texas. That's the standing. But Haynes' ruling lifts a temporary order that she issued last month, blocking the government from using the act to deport any migrant detained in Western District of Pennsylvania. The government can now proceed so long as they provide 21-day notice to migrants in both English and Spanish, and then acknowledge the Supreme Court ruling of the past that says within that time they're required to give the due process. I'll show you this right now. Now, here's what's crazy. They're going to ignore that latter part, and that ultimately, if they can move everybody into Pennsylvania, which is probably how they'll try to funnel this in, they can manipulate that situation too. But realize that that's why the Supreme Court would come in, because they can rule across from a national perspective and say no, which is pretty clear where that would go. But so here, let's go through the actual bill. So there's a lot in here you can read. It's 43 pages, but the main part of it is where it says not. So it says this case poses significant issues that are deeply interwoven with the constitutional principles upon this nation's government is founded. In approaching these issues, the court begins by stressing the questions that it is not resolving at this time. First, this court is not resolving the question of whether the president may direct the removal of certain individuals when he acts pursuant to provisions of law other than the Enemies Aliens Act, namely the Immigration and Nationality Act. So they're basically just saying they're not resolving whether he can use others. It's just about the act. Second, the court is not resolving the question of whether the president of the United States may remove under the Alien Enemies Act individuals who have simply migrated to the country, as opposed to individuals who have entered the country and are members of a foreign terrorist organization. Now, even that is debatable, whether you think this is provably a terrorist organization, or they could just arbitrarily deem anybody terrorist and then make that make sense. But you have to realize that you can prove right now that there's immigrants that get caught up in this. They're making that case, guys. They've told you that they're just mass deportation. There's been plenty of individuals that were caught up that weren't accused of being gang members, that were, you have a traffic violation, your visa's revoked, and they're still using the act. So right within all of it, you can see how flimsy all of this is if you're actually honest with yourself. And even the judge that is appointed by Trump, who's given them somewhat of a positive ruling, is telling you that what they're doing is technically wrong, but while maintaining, the point is, like I said before, it is not her position to dictate the reality of the evidence that was presented. She's applying and she's ruling on it based from a constitutional perspective, which is that they're not allowed to do these things if that's the case. They're claiming something else is the case. That's what somebody else has to dictate, right? If the lawyers in this case had been able to dive through this and prove to the judge they were lying, it would have mattered probably. So I think that's really important. Like, she seems to have teed this up for the next court to just knock this down, hopefully. That says, and third, this court is not resolving the question of whether individuals who are subject to removal under the act are entitled to sufficient notice as will allow them to actually seek habeas corpus in proper venue before such removals occurs. It says, the Supreme Court has already found that they are entitled to such notice, and this court has every intention of requiring reasonable notice as it explains in more detail below. So very clearly, the court, she goes on to explain that the timing needs to be enough. But what she's reiterating and citing it right there is the previous Supreme Court ruling that they are required, because that's the constitutional reality, to give them due process. Mark my words, they're going to argue that this gives them the right to ignore those things, that they've lied about every other thing. To me, that seems pretty clear. It says, instead, the question that this court is answering is this: so long as the government provides sufficient notice and due process, may the president issue a proclamation pursuant to the act directing the removal of Venezuelan citizens who are 14 years of age or older or within the United States, who are neither actually naturalized nor lawful permanent residents, both of which they have removed, by the way, or rather just people that have been here legally, and who are members of Trump-Netanyahu, which is a foreign terrorist organization, with a question mark. After extensive consideration and for the following reasons, the court answers that question in the affirmative. Therefore, so basically saying that it can, but here's the point. And never mind, that question mark is accurate because it's a longer question. The point is, if they're Venezuelan citizens who are over 14, right, who are not legally here, so right there, they're violating this already because there's many of them that did have legal realities, but who are members of the gang, who are terrorist organizations. Okay, so that means they are absolutely required to prove that. That's due process, that they are part of the gang with evidence that makes that case very clear. And if they do so, then yes, they're able to deport them. But how much you want to bet Stephen Miller is already pretending this means they can do what they've been doing? Because these people are shockingly dishonest. Therefore, because the court finds the president may issue the proclamation pursuant to the act directing the removal of alien members of the gang, where does it end right there? Under the act, the court denies in part petitioner's motion for a preliminary injunction. So, arguing they should hold this until that's been clarified. So right now, though, I think the important part to really take away is that they're required to give due process. Every single time that's been upheld, and every single time they ignore that. So when they're screaming over here, which is what you're going to get, these are the talking points, Defiant L's, one of the most hypocritical accounts that never finds these things in themselves, but points it out on the other side. This is DeSantis, of course. How did Clinton deport all these illegals? Hell, even Obama, because this is the talking point going around. Well, don't you know Obama suspended habeas corpus? Well, technically, no. Very clearly, they absolutely violated the rights of people that they did in some cases remove without due process. I've never argued otherwise. That is not the same thing as suspending habeas corpus. There is a nuance there. If you want to say that he removed the rights of individuals, 100%. What they're currently discussing is a way that will apply to everybody, as we already went over, despite their narrative. And even when Lincoln did it before, that was unconstitutional. Now, as Bruce pointed out in a recent podcast, he then went on to get that ratified by Congress. But nonetheless, when he did it without Congress to begin with, it was unconstitutional. It is only Congress that has the legal reality, the right to nullify that in two positions: invasion or rebellion. Both of which are legal terms, which require more than you just claiming people are invading. And that would be Congress and a vote and a public discussion. Miller just floated the idea recently of suspending habeas corpus because they want to. So as Melnick says, all of this is wildly wrong. Immigration courts do, in fact, hear millions of cases, despite these claims circulating. They do. This year, they'll decide 400,000 cases on merit. The Clinton-Obama numbers are mostly migrants turned away at the border. I already mentioned this. So they keep arguing these big grandiose numbers. And yes, as I pointed out, in some cases I can prove because this is the main point. They're all criminals. That's from the beginning, right? They're all, yes, I agree. He did it. Does that mean that somehow because Obama did it, then you could do it too? But didn't you just argue that you weren't doing that? That's very Israeli of you to argue that I'm not doing that, but if I was, they did it first. Yeah, exactly. The point, though, is that they turned a lot of people away, which then gets counted as these numbers, which aren't actually people coming in and being deported. But regardless of that, they do actually have a lot of these cases, and most of them are, in fact, given some level of due process. The arrested in the interior, those arrested in the interior during Clinton and Obama did get hearings. Now, but I don't say that flatly. I think I can easily prove in some examples that was ignored as well. I don't think these people actually care about your rights, but it is clear that where we're at now is unprecedented. And that's why they're all putting these narratives out. Millions of people, we can't do that. Look, DeSantis literally says, where do you say that? Oh, I guess in the clip. I won't play it. It's just, he literally says, oh, it's right here. I guess I'll play it. I have it right here.
A Simpson trial for every illegal alien, which
that's
by
what
the
it
way,
was.
you can't do, right? It's just implausible. And I think
An O.J. Simpson trial. You know why he did that? Because he knows everyone will remember how long that took. Like, we're going to give years long, months and years long trial for. I mean, they're playing on the ignorance of ignorant people. It's insulting. You should feel insulted that they're lying to you so egregiously. DeSantis is not stupid. He knows he's lying. So the point is, they're trying to get you to think this. DC Drano, President Trump is now calling the 21 million illegal aliens. That number's false, by the way. 11 at most, as far as I can tell, an American invasion. This is true. It's also the constitutional basis required to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. These people don't know what they're talking about. In that, if Congress were to do so and declare an invasion, you could argue that that would make sense if it was an actual invasion, which you would have to then verify as a state actor invading the country. What he's saying is, I feel embarrassed for him for two reasons. One, Trump is not now calling this an invasion. This guy doesn't even understand the basic premise that they've built to make this argument, which has been there from day one, which you've been hearing me tell you, which is declare it a terrorist organization, use the act, and then claim it's an invasion because of Biden's immigration that then justifies the use of the act to remove everybody under the guise of they're terrorists. It's clumsy, and it's been the case from day one. But now, because he just saw another tweet, he acts like Trump's now making the case. These people are reactionary propagandists that don't even know half the time that they're wrong within their own narratives. When I mean like the narratives that are false, and they can't even get those straight. Setting up legal dominoes. Can you imagine being America first and trying to argue that suspending habeas corpus based on immigration is America first? Some constitutionalist, right? You are literally the fool or part of the lie. It's embarrassing. Our country's been invaded by illegal aliens, right? So, but wait a minute. Didn't you just say that it was Venezuela? Or at least that's what you argued in regard to the act, because it has to be a state actor. So are you arguing Biden was working with Venezuela? Or is that Rubio? Oh, sorry. It's just insane. I can't believe people fall for this stuff. Meanwhile, you've got tried and true rabid Zionists destroying this country from within, but they want to point anywhere else but that. I think I'll leave it there for the next show. But the point I was going to point out again, don't forget things like this, that was the other part of the show, that it's now been proven in court. Things, again, that Drano and the rest will never point out to you, that Khalil was deported, or it was apprehended and potentially still about to be deported because Batar USA single-handedly pointed him out, and that was all they had. That's what the judge called out. In this ruling, you can read for yourself that they literally got a tweet from Batar that they took from Canary. Right there. Batar Worldwide. And the judge is saying that it seems based entirely on that one tweet. So how long have I been telling you that Israel and the Zionist organization they use single-handedly pointed to Khalil, and the U.S. Trump administration jumped? Responded instantaneously and didn't check anything. We've seen this many times already, where they remove people based on allegations from this group, and that's it. Now, just to be clear, this is about the example after that, right? This is about one where it's showing you this. My point is, I'm trying to rapidly go through this. This is the case where you can see that they used that tweet, and then that tweet was proven to be false. And nonetheless, the guy was arrested for 48 hours based on a lie because they single-handedly used one tweet from Batar. My point is, that's why Khalil was arrested. We can prove that they were tagging Noam and Bondi and Trump, going, they get this guy. That was the first one they went after. Nothing. They've got nothing. They've got ideas. They're censoring this person for Israel and trying to deport him. Is that America first? These are destroying our country. These are fundamental American rights. And people like John Rich going, yes, suspend the Constitution because immigration. I mean, it's alarming. Even if you thought it was an actual invasion, like this idea that what you're doing, it never gets put back together. How do we not learn that by now? Look at the Patriot Act. Look at any number of examples so far. You give them an inch, they take a mile every time. And his point that Melnick makes here is that, look, every single time that they've actually had a case where they were forced to give evidence, due process, every single habeas cause against them have lost. Because every single time it turns out they don't even have evidence to back up what they're saying. And that's why they're not going through this process. It's very easy to see. Stephen Miller says, every single violent Trump de Aragua whose deportation has been frozen by the courts is an illegal alien. So after what we can prove, which is that the vast majority of the people they're trying to deport are not, or at the very least, they've got no evidence behind it, the Zionist comes out and says stuff like this. There, it says, the illegal alien terrorists now get more due process than illegal alien non-terrorists. Oh, so you mean none? Pretty hard to see that none is more than none, right? Because if you're claiming they're illegal alien terrorists and no one's proven anything no one's given anything to present that or prove that, then you're just screaming the narrative just like Noam did in front of everybody because you all know what's going on. Yes, this Mike seems to be going after him every day. I don't know who this is, but every time I see Miller's post, this guy's down here going, you're an idiot. But guys, I mean, it just is nonstop. Are we really going to let these people just scream at you what they want, what, you know, the bad guy Democrat side, and they love immigration and terrorists? I mean, it's flimsy. It's lazy. And now again, somebody who you can literally prove is not a gang member, has no criminal record, was here legally. It's been 2 months since this man was sent to El Salvador, and he is innocent. No due process, no trial. He's gone. We really hope we can reflect on how serious this is. So we'll be doing more. I probably won't be doing it tomorrow based on time. I take that back. Our panel tomorrow, I really hope you'll tune in, is going to be really important. We're set for 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. I may be able to do a show tomorrow during the day, depending on time. So it'll be up in the air. If not, after that, the day after. But we got plenty more to get to. Trying to get back on a regular track here. It's difficult with a lot that's going on in the background, but we'll get there. Just got to get back on track. We got to find. Really for those that are following along, I'm trying to generate more revenue in general ways, but I'm also trying in the background to find ways to generate revenue without just constantly. I hate even pointing out the donation model as much as I believe in it. And I know, and this is what built this platform. I feel like we just end up leading in the people that are already there. So I'm trying to find ways to generate that. If you know somebody out there is interested in supporting us, spread the word, guys. But my point is just taking a lot of time away from this. If you guys don't know by now, it takes me most of, if not more than one day, the entire day to put together a show. Just the research, the time. I'm not just, gathering a bunch of pieces of paper and yelling at you. I mean, we're doing the background, giving you all the source material. It takes a lot of time. So my point is, it's just been taking time away. I'm sure you guys have noticed less, in the overall coverage, but also we're doing other things on the sides. I mean, we have different shows we're doing. I've got the regular shows that have been popping up lately, the IMA panels, but nonetheless, my goal is this show. That is my focus. And I'm going to get this back to more consistent, if not all the time, every day. We'll see if we get the time for that. But end of the day, thank you for your ongoing support. This platform is not going anywhere as much as we will always be attacked, and we'll ebb and flow as we have 2 steps forward, 1 step back our entire career. But I'm here because I believe in you. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.